I'm Ann Makovic, and this is the Minute. We are following breaking news. Protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, blocking traffic on major Bay Area freeways. This is a look at the Golden Gate Bridge, where both southbound and northbound lanes are now blocked. And this is a look at 880 in Oakland. That is where the southbound lanes are blocked. We are going to continue to follow this all morning. The Federal Bureau of Prisons plans to shut down a troubled women's federal prison in Dublin. Inmates at FCI Dublin were subjected to rampant sex abuse. According to allegations, the prison is one of 6 women-only federal prisons in the country. All 605 inmates will be transferred to other facilities. And in Napa, police searching for a suspect they say shot and killed 2 people. It happened near Riverside Drive along the Napa River Saturday night. One woman was pronounced dead at the scene, the other taken to the hospital where they later died. Bay Area's only primetime newscast, 8 and 9 p.m. All new Pix Plus, 44 Cable 12. We are continuing to follow that breaking news across the Bay Area right now, where highways are shut down by protests. We're going to stick with you all morning and give you alternate routes around this mess. Bottom line, best advice, stay off of these roadways right now. We're talking the Golden Gate Bridge 101 as well as 880. This is a pro-Palestinian protest that has gridlocked the interstate in Oakland on 880. This is video from our photographer who was able to get a look at what is causing the traffic backup. And you can see it is a protest, part of a nationwide A15 protest. They're calling it April 15th. According to the CHP, this protest blocked traffic starting at around 6:30 this morning. It was in the area of 5th Avenue along 880. According to reports, CHP confirmed there were about 15 protesters initially blocking those northbound lanes. And this is video from earlier this morning at northbound 880. Traffic at a standstill. This was at around 6 in the morning. You can see those protesters and Palestinian flags there. You can see CHP on the scene there in riot gear, blocking the traffic around the area. Live now to the Golden Gate Bridge. That is the second half of this protest. Our chopper is above that second protest. This one has forced first all southbound lanes to close, and then the CHP closed the northbound lanes as well for safety. So now we have traffic in both directions shut down. It's been going on for several hours, started earlier this morning as that group of protesters blocked, again, starting with the southbound traffic. Mid-span, the bridge protest was, again, the second demonstration to impact traffic on Bay Area freeways. First reported there on the Golden Gate after 8 a.m., hours after a pro-Palestinian protest closed all of those lanes on 880 in Oakland. Southbound traffic on the span at a standstill, with traffic backing up through the Robin Williams Tunnel into Sausalito on southbound 101. The CHP also said that protesters were trying to block traffic on the northbound lanes, and that is when they blocked them off themselves so that they could try to gain control of that situation. Vehicles did seem to be getting across the span in that direction one by one. But again, this is an evolving situation. Here's some video from our Vern Glenn. He was there on the ground. We do know that, again, the CHP is responding and trying to get people out of this mess, but he is one of many commuters this morning stuck in traffic either on 101 or on 880. We also spoke with one of the drivers who got caught in some of that traffic. Here is what she had to say.
I'm against that type of protest.
Why?
Because it disrupts traffic, and and people are going places and they're trying to live their lives too. And, what do you think, Aunt Judy?
No, this is too violent a protest, even though they're peaceful. No, it's too violent.
I was at work all night for 12 hours taking care of patients. I'm trying to go home to go to sleep. I don't have anything to do with anything that's going on. I was busy all night saving lives. I deserve to go to sleep. Did they think about people like us who we don't have anything to do with policies? We don't have anything to do with anything. We just want to go home to go to sleep.
I can hear the frustration there from that woman, basically just caught in the middle of this international outrage that is now part of a protest, a nationwide protest, again called A15. Gianna Franco joining us now. Johnny, I know you've been covering this all morning long for us here on CBS News Bay Area and on KPIX. What do commuters need to know if they're trying to get around this mess right now?
Yeah, we're still seeing a lot of these closures, and because of this, and it's causing obviously the big mess on the freeways. We're talking about 880. We're talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm going to show you some of our maps right now, just so you can see sort of what's happening still. We're seeing the backup almost to Mill Valley through the Waldo grade there as you head south 101. And if you can see that purple section on my maps, that's where the closure is. That's where the Golden Gate Bridge is. So you've got that backup in both directions now, because northbound, if you're headed out of San Francisco, they've completely shut down that area as well and are holding traffic right at that last San Francisco exit. And, we spoke to someone earlier, Anne, who was talking about maybe they were going to be able to divert vehicles off the roadway through there. But if you're past that point, that's going to become a challenge. So a lot of people are opting for taking the ferry into San Francisco. We heard from someone earlier who is utilizing that instead. And, as they were on the ferries, they were hearing, rumblings from other people and other passengers about how disruptive this morning commute has been because of this. The closure on the Golden Gate Bridge happened, I would say, just after 8 in the morning. So it was there for a good part of the morning commute where you still had the bulk of traffic coming out of Marin County over into San Francisco. And, hearing from Vern Glenn, our sports director, trying to get someone to the airport at 10:30. Now, I do know South 101, they're diverting traffic off at that Sausalito exit. But if you're beyond that point, you're going to be stuck out there until they can get traffic through. And this is kind of a strange sight to see at the Golden Gate Bridge. We don't usually see any cars travel through there unless it's overnight or Caltrans closures or work that's happening. This is at 10 o'clock on a Monday where you typically would see plenty of cars traveling through there, but no access right now there in both directions. You can't walk across the bridge. You can't travel across the bridge. I'm jumping over to 880 where the second closure is in place. And this one's been out there since about 6:30, and it started northbound 880. There was an accident actually not too far from the area, but north 880 right around 7th Street near that Embarcadero exit, just south of 980, where you have all of those people that were, in those barrels sort of stuck together or chained together with PVC pipes kind of connecting them through the middle, as we've been watching throughout the morning from our photographer on scene. And we've had reports from Chopper 5, some live perspectives throughout the morning. But because of that, we've got this backup now. This is, several miles from there. This is 880 near the Coliseum. And I did get reports that they're trying to divert some of the traffic off on some of these off ramps and exits in Oakland to sort of alleviate some of the congestion for these people that have been stuck out there. And, if you take 880 for your commute on any given day, you'll see a lot of big rigs and a lot of people and a lot of cars traveling to like the Port of Oakland or the Oakland Airport, just trying to, get through that area. Big rigs aren't typically allowed on 580, and that is something they're letting them travel through there now because of the closure on 880. And I can show you our maps. I'm going to zoom in here so you can kind of see how still it's very, very slow. We're seeing, maybe a little bit of improvement only because we're seeing less cars out there as that morning commute starts to wind down. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, we don't typically see these kind of delays on 580. But if you're a delivery truck driver and you're tuning in and you would typically take 880, you can use 580 in the meantime. CHP is allowing that for that closure on 880 until lanes clear. And the backup on 880 is still in San Leandro with that area closed. And also, and something else we've been noticing throughout the morning is, it's that barricaded area where they have the group of people with the barrels. But even beyond that point, there's looks like several people on the freeway itself and on some of the off-ramps or adjacent streets. They're also blocking the roadway, and you've got so many law enforcement and people in and around there. But BART, public transit, BART will likely be a little bit more crowded, but probably a good idea to stick with that instead. And you're also going to see those parking lots trying to get to the BART stations very crowded. They're crowded anyway on any given day for commuters, but likely more today for more people utilizing our public transit system. So yeah, and causing a really big mess out there on the roadways. And this has been going on for several hours. And, you know, we saw this months ago during the APEC conference happen on the Bay Bridge and what it did for the morning commute and how long it took, what, 4 to 5 hours just to clear that. And those were cars stuck through there. And just getting tow trucks through the backup is going to be very difficult for anyone trying to travel in and around that area, or for first responders to try to clear some of these issues and these backups and these problems we're seeing on 880 because of that.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, Gianna, because I know that, you know, this is an evolving situation. So when it comes to the Golden Gate Bridge, we have all lanes blocked right now. 880, it's just the northbound lanes that are blocked right now?
Yeah, it's just the northbound lanes. At one point, southbound lanes were also blocked, but it looks like they were able to move that along pretty quickly. What you're seeing, though, is a big backup on that southbound side, because as you know, people travel through there, they're going to slow down and look over to see what's happening. There's so much activity, and that's pretty normal for any big incident or traffic alert happening on the freeways to see the opposite direction slowing down. That's what's happening right now on southbound 880. So that's a bit of a struggle too. But all lanes are open for now on southbound 880. Northbound 880 is where the closure is, and that's in that area near that Embarcadero, 5th, 7th Street exit there as you get a little closer to 980.
All right, Gianna, thank you for that, and stick with us. I know all throughout the morning as this continues to evolve and the traffic patterns do as well. Luckily, we are ending the height of the actual morning commute. So as G said, that does mean fewer vehicles on the road, but there's so many that are already just stuck there right now that this is going to be an issue for several hours to come. And again, the protests continue. Taking another live look at the Golden Gate Bridge this morning. That is where protesters started. You can see there they've got banner out, Stop the World for Gaza. This is part of a national protest called A15, April 15th, which is, of course, the date. This is actually video from earlier today. And you can see the protesters, they're standing their ground. Again, they are peaceful, but for a lot of the people that are caught in the backup right now, they're feeling anything but peaceful as this continues to disrupt their day, at the very least. You can see some of the backup right now. This is a live look right now at the Golden Gate Bridge, and you can see those cars not moving right now as the CHP tries to figure out Plan B to get some of these vehicles that have been stuck there in some cases for hours back on their way somewhere. But very tense situation for a lot of people right now. So we are going to continue to follow the real-time conditions there on the ground, both in the North Bay and the East Bay, because we have two major arteries. Now, you know, for the people that are trying to use the Golden Gate Bridge and to try to get down to San Francisco, if that's where they're headed, or to parts south, they're going to have to take the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge if they can even get out of this mess initially. So there's going to be traffic impacts there as well. And, you know, that is certainly a much longer route. So a lot of people left with some pretty bad decisions as they try to figure out what they're going to do. You can see a person there walking alongside. And that's what we've seen on several of these protests. When roadways are completely shut down, people end up getting out of their cars, just trying to figure out what to do or biding their time. This is back at the scene in the East Bay. This is 880, and you can see police there moving in on some of the protesters. These are some of the protesters that have chained themselves to barrels and pouring some sort of substance in those barrels to make them very heavy to move. So we have people, we have heavy items, all in those traffic lanes right now. And again, they are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. They are calling for no more U.S. tax money to go to the conflict right now in the Middle East. But you can see police trying to take care of the situation here. So we might be seeing some movement right now on 880. And this is 4 hours after this started. It started at about 6:30 this morning in the heat of the morning commute. Police moved in, but did not get to this point where we're seeing. So again, this does look like progress where we see police actually trying to remove these people from the lanes. And they're in riot gear. I don't think they knew what they were walking into. But for the most part, the protesters do look peaceful. They're simply stuck there because of the fact that they are chained to very heavy barrels right now. But okay, police have gotten at least that one person loose from his barrel and is now taking that person away. Again, live look here at the scene, our photographer there at 880, and you can see some of those vehicles blocking the way right there. But there in the northbound lanes is where the protest is happening, and you can see police there trying to get this all cleared up. The slow traffic you're looking there on the other side, that is the southbound lanes, as Gianna was telling us, slowing there, but those lanes have remained open, which is good news for anybody trying to go southbound 880 through Oakland. It is the northbound lanes where you see the protest and the police now moving in there. Once they're able to remove the protesters, they will eventually be able to reopen those lanes. But of course, the backup is going for miles beyond that. So this is going to take a really long time for them to actually be able to clear up the traffic issues as this protest wraps up at the behest of police, as you can see there. Let's go back live to the Golden Gate Bridge, 101, where we have all lanes blocked right now. You can see everything at a standstill. Some cars stuck there. Hey, at least on the positive, they have a beautiful view there of the San Francisco Bay, but a lot of frustration for those people in, various circumstances. We heard earlier from a woman who had just worked a 12-hour shift at a hospital. She was just trying to go home, and she has been stuck there now for hours. This protest here that you're seeing live on the Golden Gate Bridge started at about 8 o'clock. So this was a sort of a rolling protest that, again, we saw starting in the East Bay and then moving here. Taking a live look, that is a line of officers you can see marching toward the protesters. And the protesters there, you can identify them obviously by their large banner that is saying "Stop the World for Gaza." Again, part of a much larger protest right now. It's called the A15 protest. A lot of people taking part in that, and they obviously had this planned out to do maximum disruption to the morning commute and try to cause, get attention to their cause at this point. All right, so people trying to get around it. Again, if I can just reiterate, the best advice is to stay off of the roadways right now, because this is continuing to evolve and causing traffic issues on some of the other bridges as people try to get around this. Let's go back to Gianna Franco. She has real-time traffic information for anybody trying to get around that area. Gianna, what advice do you have?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's a big issue for anyone trying to commute along 880 this morning or across the Golden Gate Bridge. So 580, if you're taking 880, is going to be your best alternate, as well as public transit. BART is an option. AC transit will be a good way to kind of get around that area. But, we did see earlier, and in one, I think it was the live shot from Brian Kiley, our photographer that's been out there all morning, they may be letting traffic through in that center divide in some of these spots to sort of alleviate this backup. I mean, think about it. These people have been out there for several hours. Since 6:30, we're still seeing the same trucks out there on the roadways. Every time we go back to this look here, this is 880 near the Coliseum, and they're trying to divert traffic off, probably on some on and off ramps if they're able to. But at one point there, it did look like they were allowing at least some cars to get through in that center divide to maybe just sort of get a few people off the roadway as quickly as possible as they work to clear all of the protesters out in lanes. Southbound is not affected as much through this area near the Coliseum. Once you get past that area where most of the activity is happening, things are actually doing a lot better for the rest of the way for any southbound commuters. So if you are, say, getting onto 880 near the Coliseum and you're heading southbound, your traffic is okay. It's all those northbound commuters that are really struggling right now. And you can see on our map here that backup, all that red there sort of concentrated into the middle of your screen there. I'll zoom in here, and that's where all of that backup is because of the closure on 880. Now I'm going to jump back here because I do want to get over to the Golden Gate Bridge as well. And this is a live look at the toll plaza here where you don't see any cars traveling through there. That's because the closure is just before here northbound. And obviously, as you work your way southbound, that closure is also just before as you get to the Golden Gate Bridge where the protesters are. We've heard from people taking the ferries this morning and how much busier they are today for a lot lot of people utilizing that as an option to get into San Francisco. If you're traveling 101 out of Novato, San Rafael, you're going to take the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, which means you've got that ripple effect on westbound 80 now, with more commuters maybe heading towards the Bay Bridge to kind of make that circle and that U back into San Francisco this morning for the commute. And again, this has been going on for several hours, since 6:30 for that closure on 880, and then at least right around 8, if not just a bit before, for the closures along the Golden Gate Bridge. And you know, the thing also too, Ann, is it's going to take hours for sort of traffic to catch up. With all these cars just sort of trying to get through this mess. And you're seeing these brake lights in both directions. I know they're diverting traffic off at Sausalito at that exit, but it's not an easy thing to do. And it's got to be probably single file vehicles trying to exit there, which is probably causing a lot of congestion for those surface streets through Sausalito, or for anyone traveling in and around that area in Marin County trying to sort of navigate through the Golden Gate Bridge. And you think about just the commuters, and for anyone traveling to work and school this morning on a regular basis, or now you think about the tourists who come to San Francisco just to go to the Golden Gate Bridge and now won't be able to have that opportunity either, with the protests happening on the span there. You know, we spoke to someone earlier who has a commute out of San Francisco right over into Corte Madera, which is just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And his commute, his name was Luis, is typically only about 15 minutes. Today, it's been over an hour and a half, and he was just stuck out there past that last San Francisco exit. So it doesn't allow him to go beyond that point, you know, and to just get off the freeway. So we're hearing a lot of that, and that's a big issue.
No, it certainly is. And Gianna, just for the people, maybe they're home right now, they're not in the mess, but they're trying to figure out how to get around it if they absolutely need to. Obviously, it'd be ill-advised to get in your car and try to come south from the North Bay right now. But how is the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge? If you could pull up those maps again and let us know, are we seeing that backup dribble that way? Because that would be obviously their other route if they needed to come south, and they could use the Richmond-San Rafael and to the Bay Bridge. But as we see with a lot of these road closures, that the traffic ends up building up in those areas as well. Can you give us any insight on that?
Yeah, you start seeing the alternates really get hit when you see these type of closures on the freeways. The Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, it's busier than usual than what we would typically see right now. But, you know, we're at almost to 10:30. The morning commute in general has, you know, is winding down. We're seeing less cars out there on the roadway, and likely those CMS signs kind of diverting people off there. So it's probably more volume than what we would typically see. I'm not hearing of any major delays, just hearing of more people trying to get across that span. You can see the live look here at the toll plaza. This is the opposite direction. So this is for commuters heading over towards 101. But if you look to the right-hand side of your screen, you're not seeing a ton of traffic coming off the span there.
Okay, so that is a doable option.
It is.
That is a doable option if people
definitely
needed to use that bridge. Come on down through the East Bay. Obviously, try to avoid anything around 880, though those are the northbound lanes that are closed. But that is an option if people are desperate right now to move south.
Yeah, if you're going to, I mean, from Novato down into San Rafael, or I'd even travel northbound 101, you know, to get to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, say if you're coming out of Mill Valley, to work your way over towards, you know, across the water, and then you'll get to 80 and 580. Do keep this in mind, though. If you look off to the side of your screen there, Ann, you can see westbound 80. That's really backed up. You don't typically see these type of delays right now. So what I think is happening is a lot of people who are making that ride over towards the, you know, the Bay Bridge, or trying to avoid that traffic over at the Golden Gate. I'll scoot the map over here. You can see the Richmond up here at the top looking okay, but once you get on 80, that's where it's a bit troublesome for people dealing with that part of the commute, because you don't typically see all of these cars on the roadway there, and they're probably just sort of a ripple effect from everyone trying to, you know, wrap up that morning commute and getting stuck on the delays on 101.
Yeah, that's your only other option to get into the city, and when you see more people trying to make that choice. Again, I think if we can just reiterate, if anybody's watching us, listening to us at home, and you know anybody who's trying to come into the city right now from the North Bay, it is not a good idea until this is wrapped up. Though we have been watching officers there on the ground starting to remove these protesters after several hours of blocked lanes. Let's take a look at some of the video that we got in within about the past hour or so from our Vern Glenn. He was at the Golden Gate Bridge. Actually, this is the video from our chopper, and you can see that is what is causing the traffic backup here. Pro-Palestinian protesters blocking initially one side of the Golden Gate Bridge, and then officers blocked the other side for safety to make sure that they were able to try to get control of this situation. But right now it's just frozen. There on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the video that I referenced earlier. That is from our sports director, Vern Glenn, one of many people who innocently got stuck in this backup. And from what I'm hearing, he was trying to get somebody to the airport. That is not a good situation because they were obviously not able to get through that area. And once you're in it, you're in it. And, you know, Gianna and I were talking about those alternate routes. You're in it once you are in these lanes of traffic, and, you know, turning around and making a different choice is no longer possible. So we'll certainly, I'm sure, get the full scoop from Vern coming up later, and if that person was ever able to get to the airport. But I'm doubting that that was happening because, again, this protest on the Golden Gate Bridge started at around 8 a.m. And the protest in the East Bay on 880, that is where the northbound lanes are blocked, that started at about 6:30 a.m. This is part of a larger protest that is going on in spots around the country called A15 April 15th. So this was a coordinated demonstration, peaceful, as you can see, but for the people who are stuck in this traffic backup, I'm sure they are feeling anything but peaceful. Want to give you some context because this is not the first time we've seen this. We saw, of course, the Bay Bridge blocked during the APEC summit last year. People calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. There ended up being several arrests from that, people known as the Bay Bridge 78. They were arrested, of course, accused of putting public safety in jeopardy with not allowing traffic on one of the main arteries in and out of San Francisco to move smoothly. So they were arrested. They went to court earlier this year, and they ended up making a deal with the judge that allowed them to avoid jail time. A lot of them saw that as a sort of victory. And then, of course, we have a repeat here of the same type of protest going on. Different bridges, different arteries. But when you're talking the Bay Area and you only have one way in and out of several of our cities, or at least one feasible one for a lot of people, depending on your geographic location, it really causes some major disruptions. You're looking at the CHP officers out there, some of them in riot gear, confronting these protesters, trying to figure out how to break this up in some sort of way that is safe, smooth, fair, because they know that their reaction to this is going to be put under a microscope as well, not only by the protesters and people who feel strongly about what's going on in Gaza, but also by the hundreds of people that are affected traffic-wise. You know, again, talking about that Bay Bridge protest that we covered last year, there was talk about organs, donated organs that were stuck in vehicles, and you had a limited amount of time with these organs on ice to make it over the bridge, and that they were able to squeak by, they were able to do it. But I mean, we are talking in some cases life or death situations when you're talking about vehicles at a standstill on a bridge for hours. To say nothing of, you know, some of the smaller concerns where, you know, you have people that were trying to get to work, people are trying to get to the airport, people who have to go to the bathroom very badly. I mean, there's a lot of different circumstances that people right now stuck in those cars that thought they were going to maybe make a smooth move over to San Francisco or somewhere in the East Bay along 880 that have their entire day disrupted. All right, let's go back to the East Bay. Speaking of that, the protests that we've seen going on 880. This is protesters there. Hard to tell exactly where we are here. 7th Street southbound 880, I'm hearing from my producer right now, and you can see protesters blocking that entrance ramp. I'm not sure if that, and let me know if you can, is that the northbound or southbound lanes? Southbound lanes, okay, so they're blocking right now the southbound lanes. The southbound lanes were the ones that were moving smoothly because it was the northbound lanes that saw the protest. And now the protesters are making sure that people are not able to get onto those southbound lanes either. So, as we said, this is going to continue to evolve as protesters find new ways to get their message out and to disrupt this, and talking about perhaps they're hearing about it on social media and say, okay, this is time to to join the cause. They're certainly getting attention to their cause, but the patience for a lot of people who are dealing with the after effects of this certainly wearing thin. People who feel as if they have nothing to do with U.S. policy or the decisions that Israel is making right now in Gaza. Back to the northbound lanes, that is where the initial protest started at about 6:30 this morning. You can see officers there. They have moved in on the protesters. We saw at least one person being removed about 20 minutes ago, but they still have other people to remove, and also these barrels that these protesters had brought out there. They had barrels, they chained themselves to barrels, and then they put some sort of substance into the barrels to make them too heavy to move. Let's go back to Gianna Franco, because Gianna, I know you've been covering this 4 hours. You were anchoring the morning show and covering the traffic as this was evolving.
Yeah, and when we saw from Chopper 5 earlier, and we could see those PVC pipes in the middle of those barrels there. It looked like that's what they had their arms sort of situated in as they were sort of tied together. Everyone who was sort of on each side, you can see that they're of each barrel. And what I'm noticing here, and I just got a confirmation from our photographer on scene, that they did open the fast lane. They did open that far left lane, so that's the closest lane to the center divide. So that's what you're seeing. That car, that big rig travel through. There's that UPS truck there.
Okay, that's good news.
It is good news. That's helpful news, which means they've removed at least most of the cars and the barrels that are on that side of the roadway, because obviously it was stuck in all lanes there. But the problem is you still have those 3 right lanes completely shut down. So again, it's going to take a long time for them to completely clear this off the roadway, but obviously they're doing the best they can and as quickly as possible. But with that lane open, that might help traffic a little bit work their way through there. I know earlier, that 23rd exit, we were able to see, the closure and diverting cars off there also. That was an option that CHP was using. But what's interesting, what we've also seen throughout the morning and, for the last 4 hours, is that you have this closure here with the barricade and the barrels and the people attached to them. Beyond that, you had, lots of people. We saw quite a few people, a big crowd gathering just north of there as well, where that closure was.
And look at this group, if I can interrupt you. Obviously, people who are taking video for social media, checking it out from it looks like that's the roadway that goes parallel there to 880, getting out of their cars to check it out for themselves. So, I mean, this is certainly a spectacle.
It is. That's the frontage street. And we've seen a lot of cars, and you can see all those cars parked off to the side. That's not normal for this roadway that parallels, 880. But obviously it was an option for a lot of people to avoid the traffic in both directions, because southbound is really slow through here to kind of see what everything is happening there. But obviously northbound as well. Now you've got the crowd gathering just to kind of see what's happening. And then you've got the group just north of there as well. If I jump to our maps right now, we can kind of show you to see if it's sort of helping a little bit. Here's kind of a mapping. Here's our mapping area of that area towards the Golden Gate Bridge closure. But I'm going to just move forward here for a second and get to 880 so I can show you that. So here's North 880. So we are seeing an improvement here, because at one point the closure here, this is near the Coliseum. I think, Ann, you're very familiar with this live shot. This is near Hagenberger. You can see traffic is just backed up to this point. At one point it was well beyond this point near San Leandro. So that was causing a big problem. So we're seeing things getting slightly better for anyone traveling on 880. It still, by any means, do not use 880. It's still really backed up. This is
right, but
several
we're
miles
actually
south.
seeing movement, which is certainly an improvement from the past several hours that it's been at a complete standstill. And I guess that is because that one lane was able to open. So we're seeing progress that there. I want to take you back to the Golden Gate Bridge, though, because we're also seeing some progress there as officers appear to be taking some of the people into custody. We saw them face to face with them, talking to them. And I think we are starting to see some potential arrests at this point, which will probably give a little bit of hope for some of the people that are stuck in those lanes right now. Very tough job for the CHP, because you have to come at this in a way that is going to make sure that this remains peaceful. Okay, I'm being directed here to the bottom left side of the screen, where we are seeing, okay, one person there, it looks like. Yep, being walked away. Yep, you can see that person. I believe that is the person there in the fluorescent green vest being walked away by officers. So I think that we are seeing the potential for loosening up here on the Golden Gate Bridge, but right now both directions are blocked. The protest started on the southbound lanes, and that is where the cars are stuck. And then the CHP ended up closing down the northbound lanes to try to keep some people out of this mess and also give themselves a little bit of leeway, because we're talking the Golden Gate Bridge. There's no parallel road that people can take as an alternative. All right, we are going to be going back, I think, to the plaza, the toll plaza, where, well, nothing's been happening there. No vehicles in or out of the city. And I think we're seeing another arrest there, just where another arrest being made. But okay, here's the live look. At the Golden Gate Bridge toll plaza, very rare scene where you would see no vehicles going in either direction. And again, this started at about 8 this morning, so toward the end of the heat of the morning commute. And this was part of the rolling protest that had started in the East Bay on 880. So the protesters, well coordinated, trying to keep officers on their toes. Okay, and we are going to go back, I'm being told, to southbound 880. That is where we are seeing protesters now blocking the on-ramp. So let's keep this straight. A lot of the issues, all the issues really that we saw this morning on 880 were in the northbound lanes. That is where protesters had chained themselves to heavy barrels and blocked all the lanes. Southbound was still open, but now we see this new line of protesters blocking one of the on-ramps to southbound 880. So if we can just reiterate one more time, do avoid the area as this does continue to evolve and protesters potentially find new inroads to disrupting the traffic there in the East Bay. 880 near the Coliseum, we're starting to see traffic slowly move in the northbound lanes, but southbound lanes right now being blocked by these protesters, and we don't see any vehicles in that area, so officers must have caught wind of this and are keeping people away from even trying to get on those southbound lanes. You can see some people just passing by the area, which is, if you're able to, certainly the best option at this point. Nobody wants to get stuck in this mess because no timeline for when this traffic is going to loosen up. But we did see police, CHP, moving in on both the protest on 880 as well as the protest on the Golden Gate Bridge. So you would think within the next hour or so we would see these protesters moved out and we would just have to deal with the traffic backup. Here's a live look right now at 880 where that protest started. The lanes that you're seeing here on the closer side of the screen, those are the southbound lanes which are still moving. It's the northbound lanes where you see those officers still dealing with those protesters, not only the people that they have to get out of here, but then those heavy barrels. Obviously, they have the equipment to do so, but they have to move it into the area and get rid of these heavy barrels that the people had once chained themselves to. Again, pro-Palestinian protesters, part of a larger A15 protest for April 15th. That is today, a day that a lot of people are going to remember for not good reasons, because of being stuck in traffic for hours. And, you know, it's not only a nuisance for some people, it could be a very serious situation if people have emergencies, people have people they need to get to, people have a plane to catch, you know, varying levels of urgency, obviously, but very, very disruptive. And we heard from some of the commuters who were stuck in this backup saying, hey, I don't have anything to do with U.S. policy or what's going on in Gaza. I agree with the protesters. A lot of people have said that, but the way that it's affecting their life and that they're basically helpless to change is certainly a huge frustration for probably thousands of people that were dealing with this. Again, you're taking a live look at the northbound lanes once this white truck passes through of 880 near the Coliseum, and you can see those officers still trying to get those people and those barrels out of the way. Let's go back to Gianna Franco again, because Gianna, you've got the context. You've been here for hours watching this all unfold.
Yeah, I mean, the closure on 880 started at about 6:30, so several hours now later, we're seeing some movement on the freeways. And northbound, if you're headed through here, so the locator here is just south of 980, right near that 7th Street exit, not too far from Embarcadero, an area where, you see a lot of trucks travel near that Port of Oakland area, and that's what's been shut down. But it's good to kind of see how our photographer pulled out so you can see that one lane now open. That's the fast lane, the one closest to the center divide, that's allowing traffic to work their way through there. Now, you still have those 3 right lanes, though, completely shut down, and I don't know when those will open up, but at least this is a bit of relief for anyone traveling through there.
Yes, I mean, any movement is some movement at this point because, like we've been saying, I mean, if you're in the middle of the backup, there's nowhere to go. You can't change your mind, turn around, find an alternate. You are just literally stuck there. And you saw, what, dozens, hundreds of vehicles in that situation when it comes to between these 2 protests.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing too, and if you're stuck, especially towards the center divide or those left lanes, you can't really work your way over to exit an off-ramp either. Right. And a lot of cars are struggling to do that, but this will help a lot of people travel through there. Let's get you updated just on how all of these closures look because, as Ann has been talking about, it's not just 880, it's that closure on the Golden Gate Bridge as well. So I'm going to show you a map here. You can see you've got the middle of your screen there. You've got westbound 80 heading towards the Bay Bridge. You've got northbound 80 where the closure is in Oakland, just south of 980. And then off to the side there where it says 30 miles per hour, that's the closure on the Golden Gate Bridge. So these are the issues that we're dealing with right now. And these are kind of areas that tend to bottleneck anyway for anyone traveling through there. So you've got the 1 lane open northbound 880 near 7th Street where they have that massive closure there still as first responders deal with the protesters there. You've got all the extra backup now on West 80 for anyone avoiding that ride on 101 heading towards the Golden Gate Bridge. And you've got this here, the Golden Gate Bridge still completely shut down. So that traffic just heading northbound is stuck right at that last San Francisco exit, a few cars just beyond that point. So hopefully they're working to try to get some of those vehicles off the roadway. You can't travel north there, and then you can't travel south, obviously coming out of Sausalito, working your way towards the Golden Gate Bridge. This closure is still in effect, and even though the protesters are just on that one side, they've got both directions of the Golden Gate Bridge closed because of that. It's typically about a 15-minute travel time to go south 101 from the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge over towards this area. Obviously, it's taking more than that, over an hour, and they're diverting traffic off at that Sausalito exit. And a lot of people were using the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and ferries as alternate, which are still your options right now. We're still at a point where you obviously cannot cross or travel through the Golden Gate Bridge. And here's a live look at the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge where you can see westbound commuters. So on the middle of your screen there, those are the commute direction, what we would typically see in the morning heading over towards the Marin side. On the opposite side, traffic's actually moving okay, but it's 1041. We don't see as many cars on the roadway, not the bulk of the commute that we would typically see. But
that is good news. And Gianna, not to interrupt, but if we can talk again about the alternate routes. Oh, we are seeing some major action here on 880, actually. Let's get the latest there.
Yeah, no, and you're right. That Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, that was the alternate for the Golden Gate. But look at this. This is 880. This has cleared up tremendously from what we saw just moments ago for travelers heading through here. All of this was backed up well into San Leandro, almost to 238. Look, it's clear now in both directions, which is great news. So that indicates to me that they're with that 1 lane open now and they're diverting traffic off the freeway there. That's really making things a lot better for anyone traveling through there. So thankfully, we're seeing some better news and for anyone traveling through there.
I wonder if we can go back to that live shot, if our producers and directors can head us back to that live shot where we saw the officers in that confrontation with the protesters on 880 near the Coliseum to see if, okay, they are still there. Those lanes are still blocked, but apparently the opening of that one left lane has allowed a lot of that traffic to clear up. And they do still have 3 of those lanes closed down, but the backup was able to really dissipate quicker than I thought. Is that a little surprising?
Yeah, I mean, it's been bottlenecking through there, and they've probably had this lane open for, I would say, almost 45 minutes now. So that's good news, which is alleviating some of that traffic. What probably also happened too, Ann, is they were able to maybe, with moving that left lane there, help cars get off on the off ramps too. So that would certainly make a big difference. But yeah, much better news, which means at least with this one lane open, because once you're past this, you're probably moving a lot better the rest of the way along the freeway. It's just getting to this point where it bottlenecks down. What we would typically see if like there was an accident or a traffic alert when they shut down several lanes. Obviously, seeing it closed for several hours made a huge mess on the freeways, but it's good to see that it's finally getting a lot better.
All right, Gianna, I'm hearing that we have Jeff Harp on the phone. He is our security consultant. He's been with us through a lot of issues around the Bay Area over the past decade, and now, from what I understand, he is in the North Bay and stuck in some of the traffic. Actually, Jeff, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Ann Makovic here at KPIX CBS News Bay Area.
Yeah, Ann, how are you doing?
Yes, well, I'm all right because I'm not stuck in the traffic. Where are you? What's going on?
Well, I was stuck in Sausalito for about an hour and a half. Unfortunately, I did not have the radio on, and I just assumed it was an accident. But finally, I turned the radio on, and it was right before I got to Spencer Avenue, so I was able to get off and turn around. But it was about 2 hours in the traffic.
Okay, so you're now safe. You're home?
Yeah, I'm home now.
Okay, all right. So good news there. No, Jeff, I know you've walked us through a lot of issues, again, like I said, over the past decade, a lot of security issues when it comes to, everything from protests to cybersecurity issues. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on here and what the police are dealing with?
Well, the Bay Area was ground zero for First Amendment activities, and it sort of prides itself on that. But what happens when we have these differences of opinion, whether it's support for one country or another, and these protesters, set up a blockade, certainly during rush hour traffic, it snarls all kinds of things and it complicates things. And think about emergency services and things like that. So it becomes a real big, not only economic problem for us, but a response problem to emergencies.
Yes, certainly. People are simply stuck and are dealing with any variety of circumstances. If you can give us an officer's perspective, the CHP there, we know that they've been talking with the protesters, sometimes for hours, and the layman might say, hey, why don't they just move in and get them out of there? Why don't we get some tear gas? Just move them out. It's not that simple.
No, it's not that simple. And certainly CHP wants to honor those folks' ability to voice their opinion. But what happens is you get these people out there and they decide they want to complete. There's no line of communication. It's their way or the highway, so to speak. And now suddenly you've got people sitting on the Golden Gate Bridge, unwilling to move, maybe throwing their keys over the bridge. And now what do you do? So it's not a violent situation, but it certainly is a situation where law enforcement has to exercise extreme patience and judgment.
Well, let's back it up to when we saw this happen on the Bay Bridge last year during the APEC summit. Very similar situation, and there ended up being dozens of arrests, but these people didn't end up facing any jail time. They made a deal with the judge. When you see protesters that dealt with that once, do you feel as if they might have been emboldened to do so again?
Well, and they always do. Look back what happened during the Vietnam era when all these people marched on Washington, D.C. They were allowed to do it. There was some violence that happened. And these sort of things tend to perpetuate themselves. So if we allowed APEC, we allowed people to go on the bridge, we allowed people to, hang out over on YBI and stop traffic from coming into the city. Now, these folks obviously can think, well, I can do that. The judge dismissed the case and told me I need to behave. So who knows? These people probably have the same concept that whatever's going to happen to them, it'll be dismissed.
And again, they pride themselves on being peaceful protesters, just trying to get the message out there. We're trying to stop the world, make everybody think about what's happening in Gaza. But from a security perspective, what challenges are posed, besides just the simple fact that ambulances can't get through? When you're shutting down a landmark like the Golden Gate Bridge, I mean, what concerns could we have here?
Well, and it's not just like stopping traffic or, stopping emergency services. You don't know. You have to assume that there could be somebody that's trying to do harm somewhere. That has potential. And certainly those who are out there that would like to do harm can use this as an opportunity to do so and really create havoc.
Yes, so a lot of possibilities here, and of course we're just watching this all unfold. Taking a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge right now. As far as your experience this morning, how did this affect your day, Jeff?
Well, I mean, like I said, I sat in traffic for about 2 hours until I finally realized I probably should put the radio on and listen to see what was going on. And fortunately, I was before I got all the way to the bridge, because once you're sort of to the bridge, you have no option about turning around. Yeah, so I was able to turn around and head back north, but some people are not. I mean, I can see from the footage that people are stuck on the bridge, and very unfortunate. I always feel like there's a proper way to protest and an improper way to protest, and certainly this doesn't fall in that category of proper.
Right. Okay, and then talk a little bit about the decision. I know you're not in contact with the officers there on the ground, but from your perspective, we saw the protesters shut down the southbound lanes, and then we had the police shut down the northbound lanes. Talk a little bit about that decision, because again, I think maybe somebody watching who doesn't have a lot of the logistical knowledge would say, oh, well, at least let cars go by on one of the lanes. We have these removable barriers on the bridge. Let's make some movement happen.
Yeah, but the thing that ends up happening here is you have a lot of people in one place, and if traffic's not moving one direction and you got people driving by and looking in the other direction, it really creates a serious accident-prone situation. You don't want to have that either. So stopping the traffic really is the best thing to do, because it allows officers to sort of contain the protest area, and also allows people, or it doesn't allow people to come by and just look and see what's going on.
Right. There's that as well, which would just cause more people stuck on the bridge. We're taking a live look again at 880. It looks like the protesters have been completely cleared out, and now officers are cleaning up. So very good news on 880. And we've already seen that traffic backup dissipate quite a bit, as Gianna was showing us earlier. So really good news, 880 near the Coliseum. It looks like they're going to be able to reopen those lanes very soon. Police made several arrests, and now they're cleaning up that scene and should be able to reopen those lanes. Of course, a lot of questions right now about how many people were arrested, what charges they might face. Jeff, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
Okay, yeah, talk a little bit about where we go from here with these protesters. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but could you see stiffer penalties when we see these demonstrations continuing to try to put some sort of stop to this happening in the future?
Yeah, I just pulled out my crystal ball here, and what I looked at is I said if you had harsher enforcement penalties, then you'd see some of this stop. But again, it's we pride ourselves on allowing First Amendment activities. I think when you start stopping commerce and start creating havoc on a national landmark, things like that, I think that's sort of where we need to draw the line, and we need to get these people to move on. Let them protest somewhere. Let them march on some other monument that's not going to stop all the traffic into the north, from the North Bay into San Francisco, or from 880 on the South Bay side. So,
yeah, and kind of what we touched on earlier. Again, the security concerns here, because that's your wheelhouse. You have protesters that don't mean harm. They're trying to protest peacefully and get their message out. But then you have the potential of a bad actor coming in, seeing this and wanting to take advantage of it.
Right, and that law enforcement has to think that way. They don't always think the sky is falling, but they have to be prepared for the worst. And if it doesn't happen, wonderful. But the thing is, these opportunities just create that sort of situation where it makes it more viable to happen.
Right. Okay, taking a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge. Still at a standstill, if we can take any hope from the protest that started hours before that at 6:30 this morning at 880. Things are clearing up there. This is a live look, though, at the toll plaza. You can see no traffic moving northbound or southbound. This has been shut down for almost 3 hours now. 3 hours on the Golden Gate Bridge, and you can see officers there still facing off with a couple of people. Their banner is down. So this piecemeal approach, again, if we can get into the officers' heads, are they negotiating with these people?
Well, they are negotiating it in a sense. It's not like they pulled in, a bunch of negotiators to try to figure out what's going on here. We know what's going on. We know what they want. We know what they've done. And the officers were trying to exercise as much patience and skill to try to get this thing peacefully resolved and get these folks to move on. I'm sure there's some complicated issues with some of that. If you park your car on the bridge and walk away, it becomes an issue. You can't get tow trucks in there.
Right.
Again, from a security perspective, this is just not a good situation.
I mean, when it does come to tow trucks, though, they could eventually be let in on those northbound lanes, right? But I guess depending on how many people could have thrown their keys into the bay, that's a process.
Yeah, I mean, they can also they can. Those are movable Jersey barriers anyway, so they can get in there, come on the opposite side of the traffic, and get these cars moved at some point. They want to try to do it in a manner that's not going to be, super disruptive to everybody else, and cause traffic everywhere else to be snarled. And I'm looking at your live shot right now. I just happened to look at the TV, and it looks like they do have officers talking to some of these people in the cars, but doesn't appear as though the people in the cars have any place to go.
Yeah, it is a really, really slow-moving process. Again, taking a look at that bridge being closed down for about 3 hours. Want to bring back Gianna Franco because we certainly have movement in the East Bay. Good news for anybody trying to get through there. The protesters have been removed from the northbound lanes of 880. Gianna, what are you seeing when it comes to the traffic impact there?
Well, Ann, I just got an update from our photographer who's out there. There's still some activity in those 3 right lanes. Excuse me, those 3 right lanes. They still have at least a couple of people there with those barrels that they're trying to still exit off the freeway or remove. So those lanes are still completely shut down, but there are the left lanes that are now open. That far left lane has been reopened. So what that means is traffic is actually moving so much better than what we saw at least within the last 30 minutes. If you're taking that North 880 ride, I would still use alternates and stick with 580 because the closure is still in effect. You can see there's still that activity there on scene, and you've got the police activity, you've got the Caltrans truck still there, and you've got them still working on that, and you've got that northbound side still backed up as you approach this area, but they are letting traffic through that left lane, which certainly has made the biggest difference for anyone commuting in and around there. If I show you our maps right now, and you can see our photographers zoomed in there, they still have at least one person there, connected and stuck to one of those barrels. But jumping over to our maps right now, look at, it's 31 minutes now. I just check those travel times to go from 238 to the MacArthur Maze. So that's where you enter over towards the Bay Bridge, and still very slow down at 6 miles per hour. But if you're headed past the Coliseum, things have certainly improved in that area, thankfully, getting a lot better there. You're really going to see those brake lights mostly concentrated now to the area where the closure is, which is near, just south of 980, near 5th Street, near Embarcadero. But as you head south of there, if you're taking northbound 880, look at this. It's actually moving along a lot better, at least south of that area, a lot better than what we saw earlier. I mean, it was a standstill, all well into San Leandro earlier this morning. So it's still improving. They still have work to do, north of there, but definitely a lot better than what we saw before. So if you want to use 580, it's still slow westbound through Oakland, but that has also improved as an alternate. If you want to use West 80, we're seeing extra busy conditions there towards the Bay Bridge. That's because a lot of people utilize South 101 to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to cut across 80 to get back into the city via the Bay Bridge. And if you're stuck in that mess southbound, obviously lanes are still closed at the Golden Gate Bridge. This is that second location where the protesters are staged, and has been talking about this here at the Golden Gate Bridge. And you've got the closure northbound, and you've got that closure southbound. We talked a little bit about public transit. Right now it's about an hour if you were traveling, say, South 101 from 37 down to the Golden Gate Bridge. That should only be about a 20-25 minute commute without traffic. 15 minutes from the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. So it's obviously still a very big mess through there. As you heard, earlier from Jeff, they're, diverting traffic off the freeway there at Spencer in Sausalito. That's how they're trying to get vehicles off the roadway there. But, traveling through through there. It's not a ton of options when it comes to public transit. You do have the ferry system that you can use, but obviously the buses, which travel south for the commute direction, can't move through this area because can't get across the span with that closure. Because you can even see in our live shot there, it's still in, very, very active and still causing a lot of issues for anyone traveling through here.
Yeah, so I mean, just this is the Bay Area. There's only certain ways to get in and out of the city and over to the other side of the bay. And so that's when we see the importance of public transit. When you look at something like this, again, we're taking a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge, which is completely blocked right now. You only have those options, the ferries, BART, and it becomes very important to remember that those are options when you see only a few ways to get in and out. Again, this is part of a nationwide protest called A15, April 15th. Obviously, that is a date. They're calling it an economic blockade. We are also following news from around the country of very similar protests. These are people that don't want U.S. tax money going to Israel. They are defending the Palestinian people right now in Gaza, but we have been following hours-long traffic delays on both I-880 and the Golden Gate Bridge coming in and out of San Francisco. It has been a major ordeal for a lot of vehicles that have been stuck there, in some cases for several hours. So we're going to continue to follow this breaking news on our web streaming service that is on our website, kpix.com/live. You can also find it on the CBS News app. Go to the CBS News app. It's free. And then scroll down to Bay Area. We are going to continue to follow this live there. We're also going to be back here on television on KPIX Channel 5 at noon for the very latest. So stay with us on the streaming service. We're going to keep it live over there. In the meantime, we're going to turn you over to Young and the Restless on Channel 5 and then be back here at noon. Thank you for joining us on this breaking news, major traffic disruption because of protests in the Bay Area. All right, we are continuing to follow that breaking news across the Bay Area right now, where highways have been shut down by protest. It started very early this morning on I-880, taking a live look right now at that intersection. This is near the Coliseum. Protesters had shut down the northbound lanes there at 7th Street near the Embarcadero, and they had chained themselves to barrels to block all lanes of that freeway starting at about 6:30 this morning in the heat of the morning commute. You can see officers there, and you can see some traffic finally moving through. This opened up within maybe about the last 45 minutes that they've been allowing traffic to go through on one left lane there, northbound. Officers were able to clear out those protesters. It looked like they made several arrests. We're going to find out more about the consequences of all this later. But we have the officers there. They were cleaning up, they were sweeping. They had to get rid of these large barrels that the protesters had moved in and had chained themselves to very early this morning. So it was quite a cleanup process, and it looks like they are finishing things up there on 880. This now is a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge. Traffic completely stopped there. This has been going on since about 10. No, this actually started at about 8:30. From what I understand, protesters first blocking the southbound lanes and then police blocking the northbound lanes so that they would have some access to be able to get across the bridge, do their negotiations, get some of these people out of there. But it has been a very long process of trying to talk to the protesters, make sure that this was peaceful. They have made some arrests and gotten some of those protesters off of the southbound side, and they were also able to get a banner that these people had unfurled, because just for the context here, this is part of an I-880 protest, a worldwide economic blockade in support of Palestinians right now in Gaza and the situation that is ongoing over there. Let's go back to Gianna Franco, because she has some advice for people trying to get around this. And Gianna, you have been watching this for hours. You have been covering this for us. Thank you. Since about 6:30 this morning, and you've seen this evolve.
Yeah, I mean, especially with that closure along 880 where everything sort of began when we first were alerted around 6:30 this morning for that northbound side. At one point, both directions were actually completely shut down. Southbound is open, although very slow, still traveling where the closure is on that northbound side. A lot of spectators slowing, but it's just south of 980 near that 5th Street, 7th Street Embarcadero exit there as you head northbound along 880. As I show you on our maps right now, you can see we're still seeing a bit of backup. Now, this isn't extending as far back as the Coliseum anymore. Thankfully, we are seeing an improvement. They have opened that left lane northbound 880, so that's allowing traffic to sort of bottleneck and travel through there, which has been really, really helpful for anyone trying to take 880 this morning. You can see things have improved on 580 as well. That was really backed up because a lot of people use that as an alternate. Of course, public transit through here as AC Transit and BART are great options also to sort of navigate in and around this area. But in the meantime, definitely still avoid 880 until they wrap things up through there. You know, there's still activity there live on scene. You've got the protesters, still a couple of them out there as they, first responders and CHP work to clear everyone out of lanes. Caltrans has been on scene all morning. And then you've also got the debris they have to clean up as well to sort of until they can open all lanes with those 3 lanes still shut down there on that northbound side of 880. But travel times are now down to about 30 minutes. So it's not terrible, not like it was earlier. I think at one point we saw travel times over 2 hours just getting from San Leandro over to that point in Oakland. We're looking live here. This is 880 both directions. This is near the Coliseum, right at that Hagenberger exit, and it's moving well here. So this is a really good indication that things are definitely heading in the right direction, so to speak, for anyone making that trek through there. Where we're still tracking some issues and delays, obviously, is for that ride for anyone heading over towards the Golden Gate Bridge, where the second closure is in effect right now at the Golden Gate Bridge. You can see no activity at all, at least at the toll plaza. It's completely shut down just north of here for the protests that are happening on the bridge itself. And it's
okay,
about
Gianna,
an hour from 37 to the Golden Gate.
Sorry if I can interrupt you. Yes, for 1 second, because it looks like we have got more breaking news right now on the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm hearing that there is a fire. And if we could pull out a little bit, you're looking at live traffic shots right now. My producer's telling me that there has been a fire reported on the Golden Gate Bridge amongst the backup. So we're trying to find out more about that, and we certainly will. We're going to pass all the details on to you as soon as they come in, because this is an evolving situation with breaking news and taking a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge. Again, I'm hearing reports of a fire, but from the perspective that we have right now, we're not seeing that. This continues to evolve as part of a nationwide protest against the war in Gaza. And Gianna, yeah, if you can talk a little bit more as we continue to monitor these live pictures about the alternates, because people are able to get through right now on the Bay Bridge and on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. All right. Actually, let's go again to our security expert, Jeff Harp, back on the phone right now. And Jeff, I believe you have access to our live pictures. Are you watching this on the stream? Jeff, can you hear me? Okay, we don't have Jeff right now, but again, we are continuing to watch things evolve on the Golden Gate Bridge. Many of the protesters have been cleared out, but there are some that remain refusing to budge. And we're looking at this traffic backup that's been there for over 3 hours right now. As for the reports of the fire, we are still waiting to find out exactly what is going on with that. So bear with us as we get these little details dribbling in. I know this is a situation that is affecting a lot of people around the Bay Area, not only on the bridge itself, from what we saw earlier in the East Bay, but on a lot of the feeder routes as well. But people have been stuck in their vehicles for hours, and a large police presence there. In fact, that has swelled in the past half an hour or so. It looked like a lot of this was sort of wrapping up as officers were able to take some of the protesters away. Now the officer presence has swelled there in the northbound lanes that officers shut down. Again, it was the protesters that shut down the southbound lanes, and then the authorities that shut down the northbound lanes so that they could deal with it. The result, traffic in both directions on the Golden Gate Bridge completely stopped for several hours. All right, so Gianna, sorry to interrupt you earlier. Let's get back to the traffic implications of this as we try to figure out what's going on in real time as we see an increased police presence and some errant reports of a potential fire.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if that will make the closure even go longer than just removing the protesters in some of these vehicles. And, adding to this, we've got the traffic alert on 880 South at 7th Street as well, where you've had at least one lane blocked there due to part of the protest. And we're seeing a backup building in and around that area as well because of that. So that's not far from where everything is happening. 880 there, where all the closures are happening near that area just south of 980. And again, that ripple effect, Ann, is pretty significant for a lot of the freeways and roadways around those areas, as we saw on 880 with those frontage roads being, seeing a lot of slowdowns there, and even people getting out of their car to sort of, videotape on their phones and catch photographs of what was happening and get a perspective just to see all the activity through there. This is a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge. We just saw the perspective from Chopper 5, and now you're seeing the toll plaza with no cars traveling through there. I was talking about travel times, and in still about an hour south 101 from 37 to the Golden Gate Bridge. Alternates through here, not a ton of options. Obviously, you've got the ferry system you could potentially use if you're trying to get to San Francisco, but obviously the commute direction for bus service would be southbound for anyone trying to get across the Golden Gate Bridge, and clearly that's not an option right now. So a bit limited when it comes to that. If you are, trying to work your way, say, out of Novato, heading down towards the area into Sausalito, you're probably going to want to avoid that until all lanes open up, as long as that backup is still there. Not quite to Mill Valley, but certainly that South 101 commute is pretty significant. Richmond San Rafael Bridge, you can use that to work your way over to 80 westbound to head back into San Francisco via the Bay Bridge. We're not seeing any other problems on any of our other Bay Area bridges. If you remember, Ann, when APEC was here, in the fall, we had that major situation on the Bay Bridge. I think you talked about that earlier, and clearly not the case right now. And obviously, I'm sure, authorities are paying close attention to some of our other areas like the Bay Bridge or the San Mateo Bridge to make sure there's no issues happening through here. But these are great alternates.
And actually, if I can interrupt you again, Gianna, we had talked earlier about the potential of a fire on the Golden Gate Bridge. That is not the case, apparently. So stand down on that concern, which is good news because that's the last thing we need. But that is one of the concerns when you have so many people that are just stuck in one place, and that place happens to be a bridge above the bay, that anything can happen, and that is the concern, the security concern that officers are dealing with. So I wanted to clear that up as soon as possible. But please, if anything else that you want to tell our viewers right now.
Point, just avoid those, hot spots, the Golden Gate and 880 until everything is cleared, and public transit's probably going to be your best bet, at least for East Bay commuters, BART and things like that. And busy lots, we're getting word of busy lots, a lot of people parking, more cars expected there, as well as Larkspur. We heard earlier from people saying a lot more cars in that parking lot also for people utilizing the ferry system.
Yeah, we are seeing, again, live pictures right now on the Golden Gate Bridge of more arrests being made. And it looks like these are some people that are dispersed amongst the traffic backup. So we saw the large banner unfurled at the beginning of the traffic backup, and that had been there since about 8 o'clock. Now we're seeing police dealing with some of the people that were farther back within the backup. So not knowing if they were a part of the initial protest or if this was one of the strategies. And that is something that our security expert Jeff Harp had mentioned, to continue the blockade, getting those vehicles just parked there and not able to move in the middle of the freeway could certainly be a part of the strategy here. Now, Jeff, we have you back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about, we know this is part of a much larger protest, this I-880 protest, now we're hearing about it, worldwide economic blockade that pro-Palestinian demonstrators are trying to use to call attention to what's going on in Gaza. Do you think that authorities could have seen this coming? So I guess that's my first question, then I'll ask the second question after.
Well, yeah, so that's a really good question. There's methodology in place that law enforcement uses to sort of anticipate when this sort of activity occurs. The problem is a lot of it's just sort of white noise and chatter. You really never know, if it's going to actually occur. Certainly there's public posts on social media that allows people to see things publicly. And maybe they could have anticipated this, but my guess is there's a lot of talk out there, and when it really comes down to deploying resources, it's tough to make that call.
Yeah, okay. What could they have done, potentially, to have prevented this, or nothing?
Well, there's really not much they could do to prevent it. If they were to see something like this advertised on social media, looking at some of those platforms, you can certainly try to anticipate a better way to allow these protests to take place in an area on the bridge that doesn't disrupt traffic so badly.
It's interesting when when you're looking at this. This is it's sort of a very slow-moving situation, I guess, if we can call it that, where there's a lot of talking, a lot of standing, a lot of cars staying in one spot. I guess the difference between this and something that you would call more chaotic, as far as how police are dealing with this methodically.
Well, and you don't want to inflame the situation, obviously. There's some very hard and strong feelings about what's going on and what they're protesting about. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to inflame that and cause the situation to become violent. You're sort of in a dangerous place. You're on a bridge over the bay. I mean,
right.
That's not, you're not standing on the street somewhere. That's really a pretty dangerous place to be. So, they don't want to make this any worse than it already is. And I'm quite certain when you're talking about arrests further down the line, you've got some really irritated people sitting in traffic there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, that is what we're seeing. We initially saw the protesters in front of all the vehicles, and now we're seeing officers sort of dribbling down farther down the line. And so, right, are those protesters as well, or are those people that are just at their wits' end, having been stuck on the bridge for as long as they have been? Talking about the larger protest here, this I-880, April 15th, obviously, they're trying to call it an economic blockade. When it comes to other cities, to your point, we're talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. Not only is this a national landmark, it's also very dangerous when it comes to being over the bay and the fact that there's no way on or off except for driving in either direction. The Bay Area, the risks that we have as opposed to some of the other places like your Philadelphia or your Chicago and where you might be seeing protests, it's a lot more consequential here.
It is, and that's another really good point. You think about the cities who, are surrounded by water, us being one. Of course, there's others in the nation that have sort of these First Amendment activities going on. The bridges are always a problem. They can be of a security concern. Obviously, they're a safety concern. and they're also a way for protesters to really stop all commerce at one point.
Yeah, which is a powerful tool that people have. And, for the average driver, if you're thinking, oh, I live in Marin and I have a flight to catch tomorrow, at some point, people sort of lose confidence in their ability to get around.
Well, and that's true. I actually was parked next to somebody that was trying to get to SFO, and she was beside herself. I mean, she was trying to get to see a sick family member, and she was going to miss her flight, and Lord knows when she was going to be able to get on her next flight. So it just really is bad.
It really is. And, these protesters are trying to call attention to their cause. But when you think of a lot of these people who are innocent, and again, I have no control over U.S. policy. I'm not responsible directly for what's happening in Gaza. But you're just innocent victims.
Yeah, and I obviously talk to a lot of people who have a lot of different points of view, and I oftentimes say, hey, look, if you want to really express your opinion, go out and vote, talk to your legislators. That's where it happens.
When it comes to these protesters trying to get their message out there, excuse me, are there other ways that you would recommend them doing a large-scale demonstration that would not affect people that have nothing to do with the situation?
Well, coming from the protesters' perspective, they get the most bang for the buck when they do something like this. Look at all the attention they've gotten. And this is going to be spread. These pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge, I've had people text me from the East Coast going, wow, look at your bridge now. And so they get a lot of bang for the buck by standing on the bridge and shutting it down.
Now, when you hear from, say, buddies, I'm sure that you're tight in this security community around the nation because that is your expertise. Do they see concerns? Is it, they see something like this and say, wow, this is happening on the Golden Gate Bridge. That's scary.
Yeah, they do. And they actually said, I hope there's nothing else planned that's going on right now in the midst of this. So that's what goes through guys like me, like our minds, to think that way, that this could be a precursor to something else.
Right. And then you see the evolution of these protests. And like we were talking about earlier, the Bay Bridge protest during APEC late last year, that disrupted traffic for many hours. It did get attention, but it turned a lot of people off when it comes to that method of protesting and upsets people in the other direction. So in some ways it does call attention to it, but does it actually help their cause?
Yeah, and I'll guarantee you there's some people sitting in that traffic that support their ideas of what they're protesting about, but at this point in time, they're not real happy about it.
All right. Anything else, any other insight that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with our viewers as you're looking at the situation unfolding as we speak?
No, I think the smart thing to do today is try to hunker down at home, and who knows what will happen in the afternoon rush hour.
Yeah, and I guess if I can ask just in closing, and I believe we're going to be speaking with you again at noon because we're continuing our live coverage, and we'll be giving an in-depth look at all of this coming up at the top of the hour. But if you can just talk about the general security situation, and I know you touched on some of this, of the Bay Area. We only have certain ways in and out of a city like San Francisco. And when you see something like this, it just makes people nervous.
It does, and this has been a big thought. When we have Super Bowl 50 here and all the other big events that we have in the Bay Area, APEC and everything else, these are sort of like the most important and likely topics that security experts and panelists talk about is what happens if, right? There's one way into the Bay Area from the North Bay. What if the two bridges are shut down? Then you only can get in through the South Bay. That's, it makes this city very unique in that manner, and it certainly makes for a very, very serious security situation if something were to happen. Or natural disaster. It's all in the planning that we talk about with earthquakes, too.
Right. Okay, so I know it's still unfolding, but do you see any obvious lessons that could be learned at this point?
Well, I'm sure the powers in charge of CHP and everybody else, Bridge Authority, I do know that they would like to see a more proactive approach to how they sort of, I don't want to say monitor these activities, but get some sort of a heads up so they can try to preemptively strike and at least sit down and allow these protests to happen in a manner and location on the bridge that allows for commerce to continue to flow.
Right, because we could have seen this coming. It looks like this was part of a nationwide or even worldwide protest, as it's called, the 815, and it's called a worldwide economic blockade that is coming from the organizers. And this is just one arm of the protest that we are seeing happening in cities all around the country. Jeff, thank you so much for all of your insight earlier and now, and I know throughout the day as we continue our live coverage of the protesters who have blocked the Golden Gate Bridge. Jeff, thank you so much. I'm going to go back right now to Gianna because she's got a lot of context for us. She has been following this protest since it began in the East Bay on 880 at about 6:30 this morning in the heat of the morning commute. It is interesting, Gianna, that they did not choose the Bay Bridge, and I guess that's something that we can talk to Jeff about next time. But let's go back to the start of all this, 880, because things are moving again.
Yeah, they are moving in some spots, Ann, but I do want to start off with a live look at 880. You can see this right here. So what we did was kind of turn the traffic cam around. We had a perspective of what it looked like right at that Coliseum exit near Hagenberger. Now we flipped it and you can see this is traffic northbound. So just north of where that camera shot is, it is still very, very slow. I was sort of zooming in on some of our traffic maps to see how far that backup is. And it's not quite to that Oakland Arena area, not quite to the Coliseum, but just before where that exit is. That's where we're seeing the backup starting. So yes, it is a bit of an improvement, not as much as we were hoping to see when you had the camera facing the other way, because it gave us a better southbound perspective, but it's still quite slow. We only have that left lane open if you're headed northbound 880 into Oakland this morning. Those 3 right lanes are still completely shut down for the protest, and just getting traffic through, even with that one lane, it's, you know, it's baby steps. It's little improvements here and there, but certainly I'm sure a bit of relief for a lot of people who've been stuck in this backup for a long time this morning. It started at 6:30. I mean, several hours ago, people have been sort of just crawling along on the freeway. And, you know, they have a pretty large section of 880 shut down with those lanes, those three right lanes rather. And at one point, all lanes were completely shut down. And they've got that activity southbound as well near 7th Street, where we saw that off ramp completely blocked off as well. So you can't really access southbound 880 either from 7th Street. So there's still quite a bit going on. I know they're making improvements. It's getting better as they clear everyone out of the roadway there, but it is taking a long time for them to do that. I'm going to move over here towards the Golden Gate Bridge. We talked a lot about this a few minutes ago. South 101 out of Sausalito down into the city there. Obviously, traffic still very backed up. It's still completely shut down both directions. You've got that northbound traffic coming out of San Francisco on 19th Avenue, coming out of that Marina District area. You're going to see some pretty slow conditions because of all those cars stuck there that were heading northbound on the Golden Gate Bridge. And, you know, this closure began in the 8 o'clock hour, right just after 8 or just before 8 o'clock. And this has been there for several hours as well on the Golden Gate. So it seems like public transit is what a lot of people are utilizing. Some areas you have more options than others. Obviously, that East Bay commute. So live look at the Golden Gate Bridge toll plaza. Still no cars traveling across through there. But obviously, East Bay, you've got BART as an option. You've got AC Transit as an option where you can utilize that instead of the freeways. As far as that Marin County ride, you know, you really don't have a ton of options when it comes to public transit, at least for southbound commuters right now. The ferry system potentially might work, you know, smart trains available, but that really won't help you for what you're trying to get through Sausalito. That ends at Larkspur, which is north of there. So it's really one of those moments. If you need to travel into San Francisco, you're going to have to cut across the Richmond, go westbound 80 and get back to the Bay Bridge to work your way back into the city, which is a trek in itself, and which makes it quite busy. And, you know, travel times improving slightly for the bridge commute heading across that area. If you're going 37 over towards the Richmond San Rafael, we're not seeing too many brake lights or delays, at least from that point. All of the brake lights really concentrated south of there, heading into Sausalito now, as hopefully they're diverting traffic off the roadways there as well. And we'll continue to watch all of this throughout the morning. And if you are anyone heading out and about, of course, waiting for the latest updates and information to see if there are any openings. And obviously, we're keeping a close eye on some of our other Bay Area bridges, as well as we saw for what happened during APEC, you know, just months ago, where protesters shut down the Bay Bridge. This is a live look at the Bay Bridge. I'm sure CHP and authorities are keeping a close eye on all of these bridges as well to make sure nothing like this is happening there. And right now, the community into San Francisco via the Bay Bridge is moving along very well with really no major issues. It is a little crowded. That's because you're still seeing that volume for people using this as an alternate. And of course, keeping a close eye on the San Mateo Bridge as well, which is a commute between 880 and 101. A lot of people may be choosing to cut across here to head 101 to head over into San Francisco instead of using 880 this morning. It really just depends on where your commute takes you. And as we saw, there were a lot of issues on 580 westbound through Oakland, which is now cleared up nicely. But we saw a lot of cars utilizing that as an alternate, and even big rigs were allowed to use 580 for a time. You see a lot of cargo ships and big rigs. As I move back, I'll kind of cycle back through to show you that live look along 880 again. We just saw the Golden Gate Bridge there, and you can see, you know, still a lot of big rigs stuck out there on the roadways, a lot of cargo traveling through here, maybe heading to the Port of Oakland. But, you know, this is certainly causing a big issue still for commuters. I think this is the biggest delay we're seeing because of the protests right now this morning. And if you are planning on commuting through the East Bay, 880 is still a very, very slow ride all the way back almost to the Coliseum. So a slight improvement there. And as we get another perspective here is a live look at, you know, CHP and Caltrans is out there as well, just trying to remove these barrels and these protesters who were basically, you know, earlier when we started the coverage, we had Chopper 5 up and you could see that perspective of, you know, a PVC pipe sort of in the middle of the barrels and some cement where they were, you know, they had their hands connected through the sides, and these holes were made on the sides of the barrels, sort of connecting them to each other. And it's obviously taking some time to remove everyone from that. And obviously they want to do it safely. And it's still, though, causing all these issues. These are those three right lanes. This is Oakland, North 880, near 7th Street, near that 5th Street exit there, Embarcadero. And now we're looking live again at the Golden Gate Bridge, and just thinking of all those commuters, you know, starting their day this morning like they do any other Monday, heading across the span into San Francisco, and then all of a sudden all of these lanes shut down. And I've covered traffic for years, and you see these closures when it comes to a bad accident, and we've had, you know, protests in the past and so on. But, you know, two major closures happening at the same time on two, you know, very separate areas, you know, really caused a big mess for so many people trying just to get to work and school this morning.
Yeah, Gianna, again, right, talking about the fact that we had these two major traffic hotspots all morning long, but we did have those alternates, the Bay Bridge and the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. I think it really is a blessing that those did not get blocked themselves when it comes to the traffic that was trying to avoid this mess. But you also have the people that have been stuck in that the whole time, and they had absolutely no alternative. We are going on about 3.5 hours for some of these vehicles that have been stuck on the Golden Gate Bridge, because as we speak, both directions are shut down. The protesters had shut down the southbound lanes, and then the police had shut down the northbound lanes, so they had a little bit of room to move and work and try to clear this up. And we've seen several arrests made on the Golden Gate Bridge, but thus far, no movement when it comes to the traffic. All right, from what we understand, we have a representative from Caltrans on the phone right now to talk a little bit about this. Pedro, I believe your name is. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Ann. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. What can you tell us about what is going on now? I know the CHP is dealing with the law enforcement side of this, but Caltrans dealing with much of the infrastructure here.
That is correct. Yeah, as of right now, the California Highway Patrol has requested Caltrans to assist with the current closures on Interstate 880 and also US 101 at the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, again, we know that here in the East Bay on southbound I-880, there is one lane that's possibly opened, and CHP is trying to still clear up that scene, trying to remove those protesters. And so we're still working with them, trying to assist them with that closure. And then also, to the same story on US 101 at the Golden Gate Bridge, as we're working with them. And we're also hearing that that means also the sidewalks on the bridge are closed to bicyclists and pedestrians at this time.
Right, so nobody able to access the Golden Gate Bridge. When it comes to 880, back in the East Bay, again, things are clearing up there, which is really good news. It looks like The protesters are out of the lanes. But I guess we've been watching the police there in those lanes. What, from your perspective, are they doing, and how long is it going to take them to be able to open up those lanes? Because if the protesters are gone, what are we doing here?
I think right now what we're working on is pretty much assessing the area, making sure that we're picking up all the debris that's out there. I know that there were some materials on the street that could cause some hazards to our motorists. So I think what they're doing right now is just making sure that there's nothing on the highway, nothing on the roadway that will cause an accident, and making sure that there's no safety hazards on the roadway as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've been talking about sort of trying to prepare for this before it happened, knowing that this was part of a nationwide protest, this I-880 protest. Is there anything that Caltrans can do to try to mitigate this beforehand?
Well, right now, what we're doing right now is Caltrans is working with the CHP on monitoring other highways and critical infrastructure, such as the Bay Bridge, to avoid any further interruptions throughout the day. So we're just encouraging our motorists to please move over if they see any amber lights or workers along the highway, as potential lane closures could be in place throughout the day.
All right, and from what I'm hearing from my producer right now, there are actually still 2 protesters there on I-880 that they're trying to get free. From Caltrans' perspective, again, we're also hearing that some of the protesters are blocking the on-ramps to I-880. Are you seeing anything like that your agency is dealing with?
Again, we're just working with the CHP in regards to making sure that our highways are safe. And so I'm sure right now we're just trying to clear all those people off our highways, making sure that it's safe to reopen the highway as well. So we're just asking folks again, if they are traveling throughout the East Bay, take Interstate 680, take Interstate 580. Those are your best routes to avoid this 880 closure. For people living in the North Bay out there near the Golden Gate Bridge, use Richmond-Summerfeld Bridge as an alternate route as well.
Certainly a tough job, Caltrans, to try to keep things moving on limited arteries in and out of the city and around the Bay Area. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges geographically of keeping things running around here?
You know, honestly, I think what we're working on, we have a really strong support system through our public transit. We have a great, strong public transit here in the Bay Area. So what these types of interruptions do cause a traffic delay, correct? But, you know, folks can definitely, you know, work and try to take the ferry system or use the BART or use a bus transit to avoid these as well. So again, we're asking folks if they can't, they're traveling to work or they have any appointments today, you know, definitely use that ferry system, the BART or public transit as well.
And again, you're not coming at this from the law enforcement side. You're coming at this through the let's get people moving side, the infrastructure side, being with Caltrans. For the people who are stuck in this traffic, or the frustration I'm seeing, you know, on social media, people are just like, move them out, get it out, let's get things moving. Is there anything that you would like people to know who are just frustrated by how slow this has moved?
We're just asking folks just to be patient with us. We understand that obviously there's never a good time, right? We're experiencing this, but we're asking folks to, again, just to use those alternate routes, use public transit, pack their patience, right? If this is obviously we're working really closely with CHP to try to reopen the highway as soon as possible, but also making sure that it's safe.
Right. And it is good that we still do have those alternates. You're talking about public transit and then, you know, the other Bay Area bridges that have remained clear, that people have those options.
Correct.
The best way for people when you see something going on to try to figure out how you're going to get around it, I know you have a website.
We do, yeah. We have our Caltrans Quick Map. It's quickmap.dot.ca.gov, and that is real-time information. So folks who are trying to plan for their work or plan for those appointments, go to that area because that information is generated through our dispatch center.
Okay. Pedro, anything else that you want to get out there that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell people who are dealing with this or just watching it?
Again, just want to encourage motorists just to move over because obviously we'll be out there monitoring those infrastructures and other highways throughout the day.
Yeah, I think that was a very important point when you're talking about you are monitoring things on the Bay Bridge, on the Richmond, so they might see extra personnel out there. And when your crews are out there trying to, what are they looking for?
So what we're doing right now, we're closely working with the CHP. So obviously CHP can reach out to us and say, hey, we want to put in a lane closure on this highway, or hey, we want to put additional lane closures on the Bay Bridge, and that will pretty much what they do is they pretty much can work and monitor other patrolmen on the highway, just monitoring those areas. So we're there just to assist the California Highway Patrol with putting in those lane closures.
Yes, at their service, and we certainly appreciate it. Pedro Quintana, thank you for spending time with us this morning, trying to give us a little context about what people are doing behind the scenes to try to get things moving again. We appreciate your work.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are continuing to follow, of course, the breaking news, taking a live look right now over the Golden Gate Bridge, National Monument. This is now making national news as everybody is realizing what has been going on here since about 8:30 this morning. So we are moving on well over 3 hours. Some people in some of those vehicles have not been able to move for more than 3 hours. And we heard from some of them earlier who just felt like they're stuck in the middle here. Again, this is a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest. It's a worldwide economic blockade. Organizers are calling it the A15 protest for April 15th. But the people out there in their cars just trying to get somewhere today feel as if they are powerless in this situation. Let's hear from them.
I'm against that type of protest.
Why?
Because it disrupts traffic, and and people are going places and they're trying to live their lives too. And, what do you think, Aunt Judy?
No, this is too violent a protest, even though they're peaceful. No, it's too violent.
Yeah, it's interesting. She says it's violent. It has been peaceful, but the after effects for some of the people who are stuck in this is violent. When you talk to an ambulance trying to get through, even something down to somebody trying to get to the airport when you're just simply stuck on the roadway. This is a live look again at I-880 in Oakland. We thought the protesters were out. Now we're hearing that there still might be one or two there in the lanes, but it looks like things are starting to open up. We did see one left lane that opened up, well, over a half an hour ago. So things have been slowly moving, and it does look like the southbound lanes are moving as well. Let's go back to Gianna Franco, because she has been monitoring the ever-changing traffic impacts from not only the situation here on 880, where you're taking a live look right now, but also on the Golden Gate Bridge. Gianna, what do you have for us?
Yeah, just keeping a close eye on 880 here, and to kind of see if it's improving. And little by little, it is getting a better. We're definitely seeing delays thin out just a little bit, not by much. Again, if you're commuting and your ride typically takes you across the Nimitz, today is not the day to be on the freeway through this area at all. That backup is still just before the Coliseum. If you're headed northbound, that's where it kind of begins. So slight improvement. It was well beyond this point into San Leandro at one point. The reason is they've opened at least one lane on that northbound side of 880 near 7th Street, near just south of 980, where they have that closure in effect near Embarcadero. So there's kind of two things happening there. You've got the protesters there with the barrels, and they still have a couple of people they're trying to remove out of the freeway. So they've opened that left lane. That still leaves those 3 right lanes completely shut down. And then north of there at 7th Street, you've got some activity also not being able to access that southbound side of the freeway from 7th Street. So that's a bit of a backup there also, but certainly seeing a little bit of improvement. Alternates, stick with BART if you're commuting out of the East Bay, or AC Transit to kind of get around, or use westbound 580 as an alternate. And then moving the map over here towards the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the second area where we're seeing this protest happen. And we heard from that lady just a moment ago. And this is dangerous to kind of shut down the roadways like this. And so quickly, a lot of, vehicles are traveling at full speed, especially along 880, coming in pretty hot and fast there on that northbound side, especially when it started. And 880's closure started at 6:30. Some of these people have been stuck in this backup since 6:30 this morning. That is tough. And then you've got this here at the Golden Gate Bridge with delays still coming out of Sausalito, South 101, heading across there and trying to get to the span, which is still not moving. It's just stuck there. And they are trying to turn cars around one by one to sort of, get some of these vehicles off of the bridge as best as possible, or because it's both directions.
Let me go back to
too.
that, actually, Gianna, if you can. Yeah, so what are you seeing there as far as being able to turn cars around. Would this just be toward the end of the backup?
You know, when we saw that earlier, it was right around where Sausalito is, where you kind of enter over towards that side of the bridge, kind of that last exit, if you will, heading over towards the Golden Gate. That would be the most likely area that we're going to see cars being turned around.
Because you still have room to move
You do.
at that point. But here, once you're in these lanes, you got, two vehicles going side by side. There's really no room to move them unless they would remove those movable barriers.
Right, and I wonder if they can get some of that traffic off of 101 itself and, get it to the point where they can maybe even turn cars around on the bridge to let them exit the opposite direction, but they'd have to do it until they can't do it till it's safe, till they get the rest of those cars. And just, like when I checked the mapping system, you could still see all those delays and all those cars stuck there. And then you got the northbound side too, Ann, where everyone's sort of making their way into San Francisco or out of San Francisco to Marin, and they're stuck too, right before the toll plaza, which is adding to the mess coming out of San Francisco. So it's just really hard to get options in this area also outside of the ferry system.
It really is. We were talking earlier about our own Vern Glenn, our sports director. He was caught in the traffic leading up to the Bay Bridge early this morning, trying to get somebody to the airport. He's texted me and said that after 2 hours in traffic, he is back home now. He lives in the North Bay, so he just had to turn it around after, wasting 2 hours in traffic. But he's one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, I mean, look at these cars that we're looking at here from Chopper 5. They're on the span. I mean, there's nothing they can do at all until, maybe CHP can figure out a way to turn them around. But in the meantime, they're just stuck. And that's tough because there's just no way off or on at this point. And, I'm sure after, 3 hours now of being in this situation, that has got to be really frustrating for a lot of people.
More than 3 hours on the Golden Gate Bridge. And that is after you saw it happen at around 6:30, the 880 situation. So this has certainly been a challenging morning for you. And I know you are a traffic expert, Gianna Franco. Have you seen anything like this? Can you remember anything like this on the Golden Gate Bridge?
Not on the Golden Gate. We've seen protests happen on the Golden Gate Bridge where you'll see people walk out with banners and try to shut down traffic, in either north or southbound at some point. And it's usually towards the north end of the bridge, but it never lasts longer than maybe 20, 30 minutes, at least from my perspective. It may be a little longer than that, but not like this.
Right.
I mean, this is going on for several hours. It just reminds me so much of what happened during APEC at the Bay Bridge, and that took 4 to 5 hours for lanes to clear on the Bay Bridge, and now we're seeing something similar here on the Golden Gate. And I think what's really, unfortunate, Anna, is it's in 2 separate locations today.
Right.
So you've got 880, and then you've also got this, so really impacting several communities for commuters.
Yeah, so if you can take us back, because you were live on air from starting at 5 o'clock this morning. As you saw this evolve, I guess, what was that like as you're trying to sort of make sense of, oh, we got this here and oh, we got this here? We didn't even know there were protests planned.
Yeah, and it was obviously concerning when I saw, it first came in through as an accident reported on 880 with at least one lane blocked. And that indicates to me that was likely when they started this closure here. You're seeing from our live look here at 880, where that's where they, set up the barrels and the barricade there. And honestly, Ann, that had to take some time and just kind of well thought out of how they were going to completely shut down traffic. So it was even safe for them to walk on the freeways, to set up their barricade with these barrels and to attach themselves to.
Right. And we're taking a look at some of that video from earlier there on the left-hand side of your screen of the people who had chained themselves to these barrels. And right, Gianna, good point. I mean, to even begin, I suppose they had to do so with their own vehicles to make sure that that other vehicles were stopping. So it certainly has been quite an ordeal, and we do still have, as we take a look at some of our live pictures, a couple of protesters on those northbound lanes of 880, and luckily some traffic moving on the left-hand side of those northbound lanes. But Gianna, it looks like we only have that one lane at this point, really no sign of any other lanes opening up, though I am surprised that the backup on the other side of it is not too horrendous.
No, it's improving, which is good. And I mean, I've been keeping my eye on 880. We've had this live look here near the Coliseum where you can kind of see how far it is. And just looking at some of the maps to see how far back it is. Here it is right here. It's improving, little by little. It was as far back as San Leandro. So having that one lane open definitely helps cars sort of, that bottleneck issue obviously becomes a little bit more apparent when you get closer to the closure.
Right.
But at least they get, alleviating some of the cars out there gets them to maybe that next off ramp where they can exit the freeway.
All right, and you had referenced, and we had talked about earlier, the protest on the Bay Bridge that happened during APEC. It was late last year. That tied traffic up for several hours, and there were dozens of arrests made after that, because a lot of people are wondering what is going to happen with these people. Will there be consequences for the fact that they blocked traffic? We know that they got their message out there. This is a pro-Palestinian demonstration, part of a worldwide economic blockade, they're calling it. But there's a lot of people that have been affected by this in regards to being stuck in their vehicles for hours on the Golden Gate Bridge. And when you come to some consequential things that people might be trying to accomplish as they're in their vehicle trying to make their way into the city. I mean, when we talked about the Bay Bridge protesters, we talked about an organ donation coming into a hospital in the city on ice that has limited time, and that was not able to get through. Luckily, it was able to survive. But just when you talk about these sorts of consequential situations that you don't know what's going on behind this protest, we're seeing people be arrested. We don't know what's going to happen to them next. But back to that Bay Bridge protest, there were dozens of arrests. At one point, they were facing the possibility of jail time, but earlier this year, they all went to court. They were called the Bay Bridge 78, and they called that court case a victory because they had made some deal with the judge that allowed them to avoid jail time. So they called that a victory. According to organizers, they had to pay about $4,500, I believe it was, in restitution. But otherwise, they were able to get off of the criminal charges. And then you see this happening again. So, the question is, are protesters emboldened by the perhaps soft consequences that they faced for the earlier protest? This is all something that we're going to be talking about in the days, weeks, months to come. But as you're taking a live look at the Golden Gate Bridge, this is what we are seeing. It is an ongoing situation with all of those northbound lanes shut down. The southbound lanes. Southbound lanes shut down by the protesters. The northbound lanes shut down by law enforcement as they try to deal with it. And this has been going on since about 8:30. Just got word from my producer, Lorena, that we have about 20 arrests so far. So that does appear to be fewer arrests than we saw last year during the Bay Bridge protest, when there was, I believe, 78 people, since they ended up calling themselves the Bay Bridge 78, that were arrested in that protest. But we're hearing 20 arrests confirmed. But again, as we've been following this over the last several hours, this is evolving. So we could be hearing numbers change when it comes to that. We have not heard about any injuries. We've not seen police come down with any sort of heavy-handed strategies to try to get these protesters out of the way. We haven't seen any tear gas. And speaking earlier with our security expert, Jeff Harp, it is a fine line that these officers are having to toe to make sure that things don't get more out of control. They don't know what other tricks some of these protesters might have up their sleeve. Again, you're looking at 880 right now, 2 remaining protesters, and then you can see one of their barrels there in the middle, because at about 6:30 this morning, they chained themselves to these barrels and then put some sort of substance. We're thinking preliminarily it was some sort of quick dry concrete. Not an expert at that, but it was something that made these barrels very heavy so that they were able to not only have their bodies in the middle of those lanes, but very heavy equipment that would take a while to move. And we spoke with Caltrans within the past hour, Pedro Quintana, and he talked about the need to make sure that the roadway, once you get the people out, is safe for motorists to be able to come through the area. I am hearing now from my producer that we have 2 lanes of traffic. Is this correct? 2 lanes of traffic Yes, correct, in the northbound lanes that are open. So we're seeing a little bit more progress slowly. We saw one of those left lanes open about an hour ago, an hour and a half ago, and now we're seeing another lane of traffic open. So things continue to evolve on 880. And again, as Gianna's been watching the traffic back up, don't want to call it miraculous, but it certainly has been good news that people have been able to make their way out of that situation, either by slowly moving through these open lanes or finding some of the exits and just being able to get themselves out of this mess and choosing a parallel route. Gianna, what are you looking at right now? I know you have the live real-time information on that traffic backup. What are we seeing?
Yeah, and I mean, having that second lane open is going to make another big step towards getting things a little bit better on 880 right now. And just looking at that live traffic cam we have as you head northbound 880, just north of the Coliseum, it's definitely starting to improve, at least having that one lane open. So that means those two right lanes, though, are still completely shut down. And it's obviously taking a long time to clear everyone off the roadway there. There's still two protesters sitting there with those attached to those barrels. But look at this perspective, Ann. It's now we're seeing another step, another bit of an improvement for traffic heading northbound. Again, this is still several, exits beyond this point. I mean, the activity is just way north of here. It's past this area. It's as you head just south of 980, and that's a pretty good amount of distance there. But, what's also interesting is when you travel along 880, and many of us have, and many people do for the commute, but so many big rigs that head to the Port of Oakland or big rigs heading, it's a really, common thing to see these large trucks carrying goods and supplies and things like that. So this is to be very disruptive, for so many, businesses and companies and commuters and people, because of that closure. And we're seeing traffic just backing up here, trying to get off the freeway at that first exit. But having another lane open is just one step in the right direction. And it's definitely improving as you travel through there, still with delays southbound, though, for anyone sort of kind of wondering what's happening. Then you've got the ripple effect of traffic coming to westbound 80 and heading towards the Bay Bridge for people trying to find alternates to work their way back into the city. And you've got the other closure at southbound 880 at 7th Street for trying to access the freeway there also. So that's adding to a busy ride into the maze. And of course, the closure over towards the Golden Gate Bridge, which is an issue also. So, little by little, Ann, we're seeing an improvement, but certainly it'll make the biggest difference if they can open a lane or two, at least as progress is being made.
Yeah, and here we are in the Bay Area where there's only certain routes in and out of certain areas to get across the bay, to get into the city. And again, this is part of protests that we're seeing nationwide right now. We're seeing Lower Manhattan, they have roadways shut down. Chicago, they've shut them down near O'Hare. We're seeing protests in Philadelphia. But the Bay Area is unique in that you just only have a certain amount of options to get around.
And what's concerning, Ann, if we're seeing this happening in other cities and areas, is what's planned for later on today. If this is something they are going to try to do again in the evening or afternoon commute, or maybe in surface streets and areas that might be more traveled, like the city, like in San Francisco. So I think a lot of us are sort of on standby, just waiting to see if there is more planned throughout the day. This might be just the start. And of course, we've been keeping a close eye on a lot of our other Bay Area bridges, like the Bay Bridge and the San Mateo Bridge and the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, to make sure nothing's happening there as well. And we're still looking live. We've been covering this since 6:30 this morning. That's when we first got a report of, it was possibly an accident as it was first reported, then turned into a major, demonstration disruption for transportation today with those protesters there. And several of them were stuck there and chained and in those barrels, using their arms, sort of connecting each other through there. And it had to take a lot of planning for them to sort of, begin something like this. At 6:30 in the morning on 880, which is what we're looking at live here in Oakland, you have all this traffic and, a pretty busy part of the morning commute for people heading to the Bay Bridge, likely through this area, or maybe to the Oakland airport. It's just certainly a busy area and very difficult to just halt and stop traffic, which is what we saw happen early this morning. Now, that's just one of the protests that are currently happening right now. We're now looking live over at the Golden Gate Bridge, where the second protest happened here as well. And they're occupying the southbound lanes of the Golden Gate Bridge, but northbound lanes are also completely shut down. We saw Wilson Walker there briefly. Our reporter will bring us a live report here shortly. And you've got a live look here at the toll plaza. And, you know, it's 11:56, and you would typically see cars travel through here at this time. And for people getting in and out of the city through Marin, through the Golden Gate, but today not happening with that closure. And this has been out there since about 8 this morning, and certainly causing a huge issue for any commuters coming out of Marin or anyone traveling out of San Francisco trying to get across the Golden Gate Bridge. And with these two major closures on two separate areas, it's affecting a lot of our communities. If you're headed out of the East Bay, or if you're headed out of San Francisco trying to get over into Marin, it's certainly a big problem for a lot of people. And we really are thinking about the people who've been stuck on the Golden Gate, especially for several hours now, and it's just been a big mess for a lot of people. And we've been covering this since 6:30 this morning. These two separate protesters will continue to do so. We'll be live over on KPIX coming up in just a few minutes with the latest information. Of course, we'll have the latest info on when all these lanes will open up at the Golden Gate as well as the 880. So join us there in just a few minutes.
From CBS News Bay Area, this is the Afternoon Edition.
Right now on the Afternoon Edition, we are continuing to follow breaking news. A day of major commute disruption around the Bay Area. Demonstrators protesting the war in Gaza, bringing traffic to a halt for hours on both the Golden Gate Bridge, which is still shut down as we speak, and Interstate 880 in Oakland partially shut down. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ann Makovic, and these protests have caused significant delays for the morning rush hour, and this is now extending into this afternoon with no end in sight. It is part of a planned day of economic disruption around the country. It started when a group of protesters blocked Interstate 880 in the northbound lane near 5th Avenue. It was just before Jack London Square near the Coliseum. And then another group blocking off the southbound lanes of the Golden Gate Bridge. Later in the morning, that prompted the CHP to shut down both directions of the Golden Gate Bridge. The CHP telling us about 20 people have been arrested so far across both of those protests. There are still some demonstrators in both of those roadways. The situation has significantly improved on I-880. One lane opened up, two lanes actually, a little over an hour ago, so traffic is able to crawl through that area. The Golden Gate Bridge remains completely shut down right now. Our chopper is overhead. You can see cars still blocking the southbound lanes and a heavy law enforcement presence. They're standing by in the northbound lanes. For the most part, they have not moved in to remove some of those cars blocking traffic, but they have started turning vehicles around. Some of these people who just got stuck in this mess, they're doing that at the end of the line on the bridge where they have a little room there north and then just north of the bridge by Sausalito, turning vehicles around one by one. Now, we have seen a few protesters being detained. You can see the CHP there. They appeared to cuff one person that was in a yellow vest. You can see them walking off the bridge. And then later, another protester is led away by law enforcement. Just some of the 20 people confirmed arrested so far. This is a look from earlier where you can see those protesters standing with a banner saying, "Stop the world for Gaza." I don't know about the world, but certainly traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge was stopped. We spoke with some of the commuters stuck in all of this. One told us while he understands the cause, he still needs to get to work.
I have to work for a living, so I'm out here, I can't miss work. I understand it's a very important issue and it's very sensitive, but I don't know if this is the best way to do it.
I'm against that type of protest.
Why?
Because it disrupts traffic, and and people are going places and they're trying to live their lives too. And, what do you think, Aunt Judy?
No, this is too violent a protest, even though they're peaceful. No, it's too violent.
Yeah, affecting a lot of people's lives today. Here is a look at the backup from above. Traffic snarled on the Golden Gate Bridge and beyond for miles beyond the Robin Williams Tunnel, and it's been like this for several hours. This is some video earlier from our Vern Glenn, sort of on the ground look. He was stuck in that traffic himself. He was actually trying to get his son's girlfriend to the airport. They had to turn around. She booked a later flight. But you can see the roadway there packed with cars, people from Marin trying to get across the bridge to San Francisco. Let's get over to our Wilson Walker. He is live right now on the San Francisco side of the bridge. Wilson, what is it like there right now?
And I'm listening to everything that you're telling us, and my first thought is on this end of the bridge, you can't see anything. I'm here with photojournalist Rick Villaroman, whose first observation is that he's been doing this for 30 years and he's never stood in the middle of this highway here like this. But if you're one of the cars that was here, you're one of the people that was trying to bike over the bridge, it's hard to see what's happening. If you know the bridge, the protest is way off out of sight, especially given the arc of the bridge. You can't really see what's going on up there. So everyone that was here was just kind of left to wait and sort of, look at their phones and try to figure out what's going on. There's no one out here to tell you what's going on. I've got a little bit of video to show you as kind of how this unfolded. Suppose you were coming up to the bridge from the south, you're heading up towards Marin, and you got stuck and you were waiting there for a couple hours. What did you do? We'll have a listen to this gentleman who was coming up here from the Presidio Trust, trying to manage the traffic up here. Have a listen.
Turn around. You hear my voice and you want to get off this bridge. That could be a glove. Head down the ramp on the left-hand side.
All right, there you go. So they eventually, after several hours, they just started giving people the option to turn the car around and head backwards down 101, which is what most people have done. If you look back down the highway behind us here, there's virtually no one left. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 9 cars that you see sitting here are the folks who have decided to wait it out in hopes that getting north is going to take less time than driving around the Bay Bridge over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and ultimately on to where they're going. Now, interestingly, we can show you coming southbound at this very moment. We've got a couple emergency vehicles and what looks like a tow truck pulling one of the cars. Now, again, your understanding of what is happening up on there on the bridge is perhaps better than mine here at the foot of the bridge. But my understanding is that sort of like what we saw at the Bay Bridge the last time around, there were cars with keys thrown into the Golden Gate to make them immobilized. So these cars have to be towed away. So this would appear to be perhaps one of those vehicles now getting removed from the southbound lanes. I can see the helicopter up there. So again, you can probably put this together for yourselves, but here it comes through the toll plaza. There has been no traffic coming southbound here since I've been here for a couple hours. In fact, this might be the first car we have seen come off the bridge since we've been here. I can also tell you that we recently saw a couple highway patrol cars coming down from the northbound lane, but they did not have anybody in them. Now, we've heard that there have been some arrests up there, although we don't know a number, and I'm not exactly sure where those folks have gone. Here comes another one of the highway patrol cars over here. But that's really about all we can tell you. Now, you heard some of the interviews with folks that were stuck up here. I mean, I can tell you, imagine any range of opinion on this protest and what's happening. You could find it out here before all these cars were rolled away. I also did speak with one of the organizers of the protest. They're sort of standing over by the bike lane that is closed. They said, look, this is a deliberate act of disruption, and they laid out their case, and they say this is going to continue until things change. And so that's really it. And very quiet here. There really aren't many people around, other than the folks who are kind of, managing the
Caltrans
the
out there.
Bridge closure. Even the parking lot down there is pretty quiet. There aren't too many tourists up here, frankly, yet. I know it's still a little early in the day.
Yeah, well,
if you look way over towards where the bike lane is shut down.
Right. Nobody is allowed to walk nor bike off that. So hopefully a lot of people got the message before they even headed to that area. And now we're taking a live look, and you can see several CHP vehicles coming this way. Wilson, thank you so much for that live look and the perspective from the San Francisco side of the bridge. This is an evolving situation, so we appreciate your live report and appreciate the fact that you're going to be out there and continue to bring us the very latest. All right, taking another angle of the backup on the bridge coming from Marin, taking a live look, this is a wider shot of the span. The backup has started to clear a little bit as cars headed into San Francisco from the north have just given up and turned around, and we've got Caltrans and the CHP facilitating some people being able to do that. But here is a look at the toll plaza on the other side from where Wilson was standing. Heading into San Francisco, you can see it is completely empty. We are going to continue to stay on top of this, but let's get you caught up on the situation on 880, because this protest started first this morning. This started at about 6 o'clock, about 7 protesters blocking traffic in the northbound lanes in the heat of the morning commute. They chained themselves to concrete-filled barrels that you can see there, and they hung up banners saying, A15, it is April 15th, economic blockade, free Palestine. This is a live picture from our camera. This is on the frontage road right next to 880. We saw a lot of people lined up here just taking pictures of what's happening, trying to figure out what is going on, because this situation has been going on for hours. Oh, there they are. There they are, a lot of people, some of them supporting the protesters and documenting that, others just wanting to be a part of the action and seeing what is happening. Then we see a man there with an Israeli flag. So you're seeing the other side of this, again, part of a worldwide protest taking place here in the Bay Area. From last I saw, it was tough to see what the officers are doing there now. There were still 2 protesters and one of those concrete-filled barrels there in the middle of those northbound lanes. So we are continuing to watch that. They have made progress. They've been able to open up 2 lanes of traffic going northbound. So a lot of progress since 6 a.m. and cleared up the backup behind it, which is really the good news. But again, there still is police activity and a backup in the northbound direction as a lot of people try to make their way through that. Again, that is 880 in Oakland. And here's another angle of some of the protesters blocking an on-ramp. Now, this is an on-ramp to the southbound lanes on Interstate 80. This is 7th Street right by the port. Let's get over to Gianna Franco now. She has been watching the traffic impact of all of this since before it began, trying to cover a normal Monday commute until things got really crazy. Gianna, what's the situation?
It's just been a big mess all across the Bay Area, especially out of the East Bay and across the Golden Gate. And, you know, looking live there from Chopper 5, you could see that it looks like they're having some progress. I know Wilson, just a second ago, you saw that car being removed. At all for any action since this has started around 8 o'clock this morning for the Golden Gate and 6:30 over on 880. But hopefully this will get moving along, and these folks who've been stuck on the bridge will get a little bit of a break. This backup extending well into Sausalito, and that's an improvement. You know, they are turning cars around on the north end of the bridge to kind of get cars off the roadway, and they're trying to have both. They have both directions still shut down. They've got that southbound side where the protesters were staged, as well as the northbound side for safety. So let's jump to our maps right now. You can see that there's still some CHP activity as they hopefully move some of those cars there, but that backup still pretty significant, especially on that southbound direction heading out of Sausalito. You're really at a standstill for cars that are just stuck there and don't really have an option. And again, when they move the cars off the roadway, it's literally like one by one trying to divert them and turn them around. And you saw Wilson's live shot there. He said a lot of the cars were able to turn around on that south end, which is that San Francisco side heading over into Marin County. It looks like things are getting slightly better there in the sense of them removing some vehicles, but some cars waiting it out until they clear this out of lanes. But literally not seeing any action unless it's a vehicle like a CHP or a tow truck trying to get some of these cars off the bridge. And over on 880, so you still have all of this backup here northbound as you head through Oakland over to where the closure is just south of 980. And you've got troubles on that southbound side as well. They've got that closure near 7th Street, so that's causing a lot of problems there in both directions. But this is good news as we take a live look here at one of our traffic cams. This is just north of the Coliseum, finally seeing an improvement with at least 2 lanes now open. That still leaves 2 right lanes closed near that Embarcadero exit where everything is being staged right now. But what a big difference we've seen. I mean, this was literally backed up all the way into San Leandro throughout the morning, and it's definitely getting a lot better. And if you're trying to get to the Bay Bridge via 880, you won't have any delays when you get here. But, you know, and this is something else we've been thinking about is keeping an eye on other Bay Area bridges, just in case. We saw what happened back during APEC when the Bay Bridge was shut down, and we saw, you know, we're just throughout the day to see if anything else is sort of planned or could be an issue, especially as we get a little closer to that evening commute. But the morning commute is just snarled because of this. But seeing an improvement on North 880 with 2 lanes open, and hopefully we'll get some better news soon on the Golden Gate.
All right, and you know what? I do have some really good news for you right now, because we're hearing that they are about to start opening lanes southbound on the Golden Gate Bridge after this has been shut down for over 4 hours right now. 1 or 2 lanes could be opening very soon, according to the CHP. So we are going to continue to follow this minute by minute as things evolve. But boy, for people who have been stuck in that traffic for hours, relief could soon be on the way. We are going to stay on top of this, continuing coverage here on CBS News Bay Area and on KPIX. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. All right, back here live, and we are looking at the breaking news that we have been following all day: closures on 880 and the Golden Gate Bridge because of protesters blocking the roadway, pro-Palestinian protesters. It's part of an A-15 protest. They call it a worldwide economic blockade for Gaza. And joining us live now is KPIX security analyst Jeff Harp. Jeff, we have been speaking with you all morning long as this has been evolving. The protesters have been peaceful, but from a security perspective, how significant has this been, especially when we're talking the Golden Gate Bridge?
Yeah, we talked earlier this morning about it, and the big problem is now you've got this, not only the bridge block, but any emergency services that need to get through, any critical incident that happens, or any crime activity that might happen near or around that bridge is going to be problematic. Although things are starting to flow a little bit, it's still an issue.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, you have a lot of people who have nothing to do with this, who are trapped in their vehicles on the Golden Gate Bridge, and this has been going on for hours. What kinds of challenges does that pose?
Well, you had an interview with a gentleman earlier, and I can tell you one of the challenges that it poses is irritated people
Yeah.
will tend to take matters into their own hands, and we don't want that to happen either. Not only that, now you have law enforcement fully occupied. I'll guarantee you the Golden Gate Division of CHP has every single resource deployed over there. There are other things going on in the area that are important. So it's really a shame that we tie up law enforcement's hands for so long when other things, they could be doing other more productive things.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about that law enforcement response? Because I know a lot of people looking at this from the outside saying, hey, why don't you just blow off some tear gas and move these people out of the lanes? It's more of a delicate dance of negotiation.
Well, I guess you could call it negotiation. A dance is a good way to put it. They have really delicate dance that they're going to have to put on here. They don't want to make these protesters any more irritated, or the people in the cars any more irritated than they already are. They're trying to allow these people to voice their opinion. Obviously, doing it on the Golden Gate Bridge like this is not a good idea, but certainly they don't want to create a situation where suddenly they get something violent happen. Either somebody in a car gets mad, one of the protesters gets mad. They're trying to keep this thing level and calm, and it looks like traffic's flowing a little bit.
Oh, yes. You can see our live picture. I didn't want to interrupt you, but really good news, everybody. The Golden Gate Bridge is now back open. The southbound lanes are moving again. So we are nearing an end to at least this phase of the protest. But as we were talking about earlier, Jeff, this is part of a larger protest, at least nationwide, if not worldwide. And we're seeing protests in other cities, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. But the Golden Gate Bridge has been something that nationwide people have been paying attention to because obviously it's a landmark. But we are so tied to these limited options for getting in and out of the city and around the Bay Area. Tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, the difficulties there and the challenges security-wise.
Well, this 7x7 city that's surrounded by water and a few bridges creates challenges for security for a lot of different reasons. If we have a natural disaster, we've had multiple events here in this city where in that planning stage, one of the biggest topics that comes up is how do we get in and out of this city if something drastic happens? And that includes natural disasters, criminal activity. We had Super Bowl 50, APEC. Now there was other protests that happened that blocked at the Bay Bridge. So all of these things come into play when law enforcement starts planning to try to figure out what ifs.
Right.
Now we've had this occur, and I'm sure CHP and others are starting to look at what can they do to sort of not make this go away, but maybe predict it or be a little more proactive in trying to establish some sort of a perimeter around the areas that prevent them getting on the bridge.
Yes. Okay. So there'll be a lot of time for analysis afterward. Jeff Harp, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it. And again, The breaking news, the good news is that the southbound lanes on the Golden Gate Bridge are now open, and we're hearing they are about to open the northbound lanes. Going to take a quick break. Be right back.
Thanks.
At the Golden Gate Bridge, very good news there. Southbound traffic is moving again. And from what we understand, northbound traffic is about to start moving again. So all lanes on the Golden Gate Bridge, after being shut down for 4.5 hours because of a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest, things are finally moving again. Very good news for people who were stuck in their vehicles on that bridge for more than 4 hours. We'll be right back. All right, back out live following our breaking news. This is 880 in Oakland. Protesters still on the roadway as they have been since 6:30 this morning. So traffic tied up there, though some is getting through. Golden Gate Bridge is open and clear. Thanks for joining us today.
Questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News. I'm Lilia Luciano. New at this hour, the first jurors have been seated at former President Donald Trump's criminal case in New York. Let's head there to Lower Manhattan, where CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman is there with a recap of what's been happening so far in court. So I'll let you do that, Katrina. Give us a sense of what's going on there, what happened inside the courtroom.
Hi, Lilia. So we've been covering a lot of ground today. The first half of the day was really dealing with some evidence, the judge making determinations about what could and could not be let in for this trial. One thing was the Access Hollywood tape where Trump talked about groping women. The judge has said that the prosecution can't play the tape, but they can let in the transcript for it and bring it up with witnesses. They also can't bring in an E. Jean Carroll tape where he talked about that Access Hollywood tape as well. Another thing that came up today is that the prosecution is saying that Trump should be held in contempt because he has violated his gag order a number of times now with Truth Social posts. And so the judge has now set a hearing about this. It's going to be on April 23rd. And the prosecution's asking that Trump be fined $1,000 per violation and that he be reminded that he can be jailed for being in contempt of this order. And as you said, the jury has now been sworn in. The trial is officially underway now.
So you just mentioned those posts. We're seeing a post on screen right now. I understand that he's still under this gag order, but we expect that Trump is going to speak after court today. So what can and what can he not talk about?
Yeah, so to remind people, the gag order that he's under prevents him from talking about potential witnesses, potential jurors. He can't talk about the prosecution's team, although he can talk about DA Alvin Bragg himself. He also can't talk about the relatives of court staff, and he cannot talk about the judge's relatives or the DA's relatives either. So the issue is he has put up some posts that mention Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, who are both set to be witnesses in this trial.
You were inside the courtroom. Talk to us about what he was like throughout the day. What was his demeanor?
It's been very interesting because Trump has been sitting there just now. The judge was giving the jury instructions, and granted, it was about 30 minutes of instructions, but Trump's eyes were closed. His arms were crossed over his chest. He was sort of leaning back. He was leaning forward. We don't think that he was asleep. And actually, there was a point where the judge said that it was going to be a